Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us here in the Treehouse. Before we start our discussion of this month's entry into the Positive Masculinity playlist, I wanted to remind you to check out the show notes for the list of sources we use in this episode, as well as a list of content warnings. If you would like to connect with us or share ideas for future episodes, you can find us on Blue Sky, Instagram, and Facebook at A Safe Place for Boys, or email us at safeplaceforboys@gmail.com. Thanks again for listening. Stay safe out there and enjoy the show.
I think it means like you can buy a bag of beer.
A bag of beer?
Yeah, you get like...
You know how they do it in Alabama, just beer loose in a bag.
Not loose in a bag, but there wasn't a
You can get your
laundromat.
Natty Ice in a paper sack, yeah.
What's the sack then? You know what I mean? Like
I don't know.
I thought suds meant like washing your clothes too, but what would you...
It could not matter less. Welcome to A Safe Place for Boys, compassionate conversations about masculinity in media. I am your host, Kelsey Sykes, and with me, as always, is the only Ute I trust, Dr. Spencer Todd Bennington, PhD. How are you, Spencer?
I would like to plead the fifth.
Oh, okay. Well, I guess that's it for this episode. We will, I guess, resume recording when our lawyers are present.
Thank you for respecting my constitutional right.
You have got to stop talking, dude. Once you plead the fifth, you have got to stop talking.
Are you a cop? You have to tell me if you're a cop.
I don't, actually. That's not a law.
No!
Cops do not have to tell you that they're cops.
Yeah.
People on cop shows talk to the cops way too much.
Yeah, they do.
Welcome to Cop Talk.
No,
don't do it.
Don't. Yeah. I'm okay. I'm ready to really get icy, nicey, and dicey and on some legal... Why are you... What?
I am trying to figure out the source of the wordplay, and I can't figure out why you're doing
There's
it.
none. There's none. I just wanted to say that I'm ready to dissect the legal precedents. I'm ready to exercise some jurisprudence. I am ready to perhaps investigate some constitutional irregularities. That one's not as good. I don't know about that one.
I don't know that grammatically you got any of those right, but that's okay. Why are we talking in perfect legalese today?
I can exercise jurisprudence by watching My Cousin Vinny.
Yeah! I love this movie.
It's a good one.
This one is very funny. This is one of the ones that you showed me that I couldn't believe I had never seen. This feels like the kind of movie that should have been on TBS every Saturday afternoon, and I don't know why it wasn't.
That's a good point. I didn't see it until adulthood either. Someone had to show it to me, and now I can't remember my first experience. I forgot that I was the one to introduce you to this.
Mm-hmm.
Wow, that's amazing. And
This in Jurassic Park.
Wow.
You know what? It's a classic. It's an Oscar award-winning movie, and by that I mean Marisa Tomei. Of course.
Yeah.
Of course. All kinds of gold in this one.
Yeah. That's a real grit of a tidbit.
And what, pray tell, is a grit?
What is a grit? Well, it's made from corn.
Yeah, I do wonder, so we'll talk later about the way that this movie is viewed in the legal community. I would be interested to know what this movie did for the sale of grits.
Probably nothing.
Yeah, I was going to say, we will also talk later about why this movie did not play particularly well in the part of this country where people eat grits. Mm-hmm. But I do wonder if there were Northerners out there who were like, gotta try me these grits.
What
they got butter on them.
Sometimes, and that's another thing that this movie was kind of adamant about is like, they're grits and you put butter on them. And it's like, well, sometimes, but some people put sugar. Cheese, yeah.
Cheese and sugar?
No, never. Gross.
That does sound awful.
Those are two different parts of the grit eating world.
Write in with your favorite grit toppings, everyone.
Safe Place for Boys at gritmail.com.
Yep. I mean, I'm not mad about just the plain butter on the grits. I think that's also good. But yeah. I'm sure there's a whole world out there. All right. Well, this story begins with two nice boys from Brooklyn driving through the American South in their, What kind of car is it? Do you remember?
1964 Buick Skylark. Metallic, mint green with a white convertible top.
Yep, exactly. You got the year right and everything. Good for you.
Yeah.
Yeah, so these
It's almost as if it's an important part of the film.
It's almost like it's the most important part of this movie. Yeah, so these boys are on their way from their college in NYU to UCLA. It's implied they're going to grad school together, I guess. Yeah. I'm not entirely sure why the road trip from NYU, which is in New York City, to UCLA, which is in Los Angeles, is taking them through Alabama. Mm-hmm. They just are kind of like, we wanted to see the sights of Alabama.
They do specifically say, and this was my inference, that the weather is nicer for a convertible car if you go down south first and then cut through New Orleans, and Texas, three more days of Texas.
Everyone's favorite road trip, the east to west trek across the middle of Texas. And then the most beautiful road trip in America. Everyone agrees.
When you're halfway through Texas, you get to go through West Texas. There's a sort of existential dread that comes with driving through Texas.
Yeah, these boys neatly avoid that. They do not make it to Texas.
Well, that's the most tragic part of this movie is they are eventually still going to have to drive to Texas. After all the trauma that they go through in Alabama.
Yeah.
To conclude their journey, they still have to go drive through Texas. And that's the unwritten sad ending of this film.
I think they buy a plane ticket to Los Angeles.
With what money?
They bother.
What money?
Well, they didn't have to pay for the lawyer, so...
No, but they spent their last 38 cents on that, not can of tuna.
We are getting ahead of ourselves.
But on the beans. They spent it on the beans.
Yeah, so as Spencer just gave away another
Spoiler alert.
Important plot point, our boys do stop at a convenience store called Sack o' Suds.
Sack o' Suds.
These boys are getting some classic road snacks like cans of baked beans. Mm-hmm. Don't know if they have a can opener in their car, but a lot of canned goods. Their whole body's length worth of cans that they've got in their arms. And Ralph Macchio, who is his character's named Bill, is like, oh, we got to get some tuna. Because you know when you're on a long road trip, what you desperately want is canned tuna. And the other guy, whose name is Stan, is not interested in tuna. So Ralph Macchio grabs some, but he's, again, carrying every canned good on planet Earth in his arms at the time. And so he doesn't have a free hand for it anymore, so he shoves it in his pocket. Mm-hmm. And when he gets up to the cashier and he's paying for all of his stuff and asking the cashier to actually fill up his cup with slushy, and the cashier is a real jerk to him about it for some reason, he does forget to pay for the tuna. Forgets that he has it in his pocket. And this movie is from 1992, so this is kind of before the days that every store had like an alarm at their doors. So he gets away with it. The real tragedy of this movie, Ralph Macchio fully gets away with stealing a can of tuna. Mm-hmm. So they're in the car, driving away. They got their top down. It's a beautiful day. And that Ralph realizes that he has the tuna in his pocket still. And he's like, oh, whoops, look at that. And Stan immediately freaks out. And that's going to kind of be Stan's personality this whole movie. And he starts joking about the medieval laws that they have in the South. Because, you know, the minimum age for execution in Alabama is 10, you know. Mm-hmm. Until a cop shows up behind them and does pull them over. And once again, Stan is like, we're going to die. Right now, we're going to die. And Ralph Macchio is like, just relax. It's tuna is a misunderstanding. But Stan's prediction kind of turns out to be correct because this cop, what does he do when he pulls them over?
Well, he takes his sweet ass time, first of all, but
follows them for like a half an hour.
Eventually does turn his light on, pull them over, and immediately gets out, pulls the shotgun on them, and tells them to put their hands up and then exit the vehicle, which has me wondering
how
can
you kind of see them doing it. They've got their hands up. They're like, how do I open the door without putting my hands down? So this cop does arrest them on sight and throws them immediately into the worst police lineup ever. We'll talk more later about why this police lineup is so bad. But the important thing in the next couple of scenes is that these boys still think that they have gotten arrested for stealing a can of tuna. And so everything that they say and do over the course of the next couple of scenes is assuming that this is an extremely outsized reaction to accidentally taking a can of tuna from a convenience store.
Meanwhile, at the Sack Sacco Suds.
Yeah, so it turns out that's not actually why all of this hullabaloo with the police is happening. Why are the police reacting so strongly right now?
Well, you see, Sheriff Farley done got a call down to the Sacco Suds to investigate not Grand Theft Tuna, but instead murder.
Dun, dun, dun!
It seems as if after our boys had left with their 22 discrete items, plus an undeclared can of tuna, someone came in and shot that clerk, probably because they asked for a large slushie and only got half a cup.
So stingy with the slushie. I don't know why. But yes, Jimmy Willis, the name of the cashier, he is dead. And the police believe that our friends Bill and Stan are the ones who perpetrated the murder because they have all these witnesses who say they saw these two guys drive up in a mint green convertible and go in and shoot that clerk. And it's a little bit too much of a coincidence, Sheriff Farley thinks, and so he hauls these boys in.
If I'm Sheriff Farley, those two guys did it. There is plenty of evidence to convict them of murder at this point.
Well, there's plenty of evidence to arrest them for murder.
Sure. Oh, yeah,
there is, as it turns out, not enough to convict them. But, I mean, it is kind of wild in this little town of Wazoo, Alabama, that there just happened to have been two sets of dudes in mint green convertibles. Mm-hmm. But this is why, we have a legal system that works the way it does, because Sheriff Farley is fallible, it turns out. But he's not the only one. A lot of people over the course of the next few scenes are just behaving as stupidly as humanly possible. Farley hauls these boys in, he's got them in separate rooms, and Bill starts talking right away, and he's like, I'm fully willing to cooperate, this was just a misunderstanding, I'll sign any kind of statement you need me to sign. And Sheriff Farley is like, really? That's great. That's very convenient. And Bill accidentally sort of implicates Stan in aiding and abetting, again, what he assumes to be his accidental theft of tuna and what Sheriff Farley is assuming is murder. So here's a pro tip for everybody at home. If you are in a room with a cop, really in any sort of circumstance, but certainly if you have been arrested by a cop, what's rule number 1? Shut the fuck up.
No, the only word I'm saying is lawyer.
Yeah. But they're going to try to get you to engage in casual conversation.
And then to that I reply, lawyer.
And when your lawyer gets there, because again, you have only asked for a lawyer and you have said literally no other words to this cop, once your lawyer gets there, make sure your lawyer checks to see what it is you have been arrested for. Because otherwise, you got some real Abbott and Costello ass antics happening in a police station, and he gets Ralph Macchio to say out loud, I shot the clerk?
Twice
he says it, and guess what doesn't translate in a written transcript?
Tone, punctuation, inflection.
Yes.
Question marks.
So what has happened is that Bill said the words,
incredulity.
I shot the clerk, with a question mark at the end, and Sheriff Farley has written down, I shot the clerk, period.
Mm-hmm.
Shut the fuck up when you're around the police. Don't talk to them.
Yeah, that is our official stance here at A Safe Place for Boys. It's safer if you don't talk to the police.
So, our boys are in big trouble now because they have Bill has accidentally confessed to murder and implicated Stan. So they're going to need a great attorney. Do they have access to a great attorney?
Well, no, but I will call my mom. I'm going to call my mom.
Yeah, so Stan's parents are hiking in Chile or something, so they are unreachable, but Bill calls his mother. His mother is obviously frantic, especially when they're both trying to talk to her on the phone at the same time, and Stan is like, they're all inbred down here, they got the clan, they're all sleeping with their sisters, in a room full of people who all then turn to look at him like, come on, man. That's not very nice. And they don't have money. That's the other thing. They do not have money to pay for a good attorney, but fortunately, they do have access to a free attorney. Mm-hmm. And who is their free attorney? Other than the public defender, who we will talk about later.
Luckily, Bill's ma suggests my cousin Vinny.
Yeah. So, Vinny pulls into Wazoo, Alabama in the world's longest car. Just a very long car. He's got his shiny black cowboy boots on. He's got a leather jacket. And he's got the most beautiful woman on planet Earth in his passenger seat. And her name is Mona Lisa, and she's the only character who matters in my opinion. She is just here to take pictures of old men on porches and talk shit about the local Chinese food. And to tell Vinny there's something wrong with his car, which he does not agree with, but the guy walking past is like, oh, well, you know what your problem is. Got mud in your tires.
Got mud in your tires.
Neither Vinny nor Lisa has ever encountered the idea of mud getting into or around wheels before, which seems weird for people who both know a lot about cars, but they are both from the city, where there is famously not that much mud.
Nope.
So they're just incredulous at this point that mud could possibly get into tires in a way that would be detrimental to a car.
Well, it's not like New York City. We're famous for our mud down here.
It's true.
Alabama, we're famous for our mud.
Is that a thing you've heard before? That Alabama is famous for mud?
No.
Yeah, me either.
No, it's not. I do know that people in the South like to talk about how the soil is different in different places.
Well, it literally is.
I'm from a red clay state, you see.
But yeah, Alabama, people sound off. Famous for your mud? The first thing that Vinny does is go over to the jail, or the prison, I guess, where Bill and Stan have been sent, and they see all these people outside protesting the death penalty for someone named Norton, which is always a good sign to see death penalty protesters outside the place you're being sent. Bill and Stan have been put in their street clothes in the same cell, which is, not a great idea when two people are co-conspirators and could maybe theoretically continue to co-conspire in a jail cell together. But anyway, Bill falls asleep, and when Vinny comes in, Stan is the only one awake and just immediately assumes Vinny is there to sexually assault him, because that's what happens in jail. Isn't that funny? Anyway, this is another, Abbott and Costello, who's on first, people misunderstanding each other, but less funny because it's about sexual assault.
Yeah.
Also hilarious is the scene where Bill and Stan sit down with Vinny and discover that not only has he not tried a murder case before, he's never tried any criminal cases before.
No.
And not only that, he's never done trial law before.
Right.
He is a personal injury lawyer. And he has been for how long?
About going on 16 years?
Incorrect. 6 weeks.
Oh.
Because it took Vinny 6 years to pass the bar exam. The movie treats this like it's a joke, like Vinny is supposed to be seen as stupid because of this. In the original script, he was written to have dyslexia. And they took that out in later drafts because of some studios, something. But I think that's kind of a shame because it gives you some context for why it could take a person 6 years to pass the bar exam. But even without that, it's not particularly shameful to have failed the bar exam multiple times. That's not actually that rare an occurrence. 6 years is kind of a lot, but there are lots and lots of practicing lawyers who had to take the bar exam multiple times. That does not make a person stupid. It's a very hard test. And also, they don't actually teach you how to take the bar exam in law school. The, 1 semester I was in law school, there were just always salespeople from these, secondary companies whose whole thing was they would, sell you classes about how to take the bar exam. And that, I think, was more than anything else the thing that made me quit law school, because it was you mean I have to go through all of this incredibly expensive schooling to then still not be able to do the thing? What is the point of this? Because, of course, all of those classes are extremely expensive. And if you are, say, a person who already has to work multiple jobs to make ends meet, like Vinny was, you can't afford to take a bar prep class on top of paying for law school, which even in the 90s probably cost somewhere in the neighborhood of $100,000. So, yeah, it took him a while to pass the bar. That doesn't really mean anything about his actual aptitude as a lawyer. However, he doesn't seem to have ever been in a courtroom before, and that does raise more red flags for me, but we will get there. In any case, this is also just the best shot that these boys have. It's Vinny or a public defender, and so they pick Vinny because at least he's a person that one of them knows. So Vinny has to go to the judge to basically get permission to practice in the state of Alabama, because he is not licensed in the state of Alabama. And so he goes into this meeting with the judge and starts off by putting his muddy cowboy boots up on the judge's desk.
Not a good look, then.
Not a good look. Kind of buck wild that a person would think that was appropriate in any context ever.
And you know he doesn't, because as soon as the judge walks in, he sort of like snaps up and stands, and he realizes like he's being just a bit too cash.
Yeah, and the judge here is like, well, that's very informal of you, which is nice, I think. And then the judge starts asking Vinny about his qualifications and his experience in murder trials. And this is where Vinny starts to get himself into what should get him into a lot of trouble, which is he starts just fully lying to this judge. So we made the joke earlier about 16 years worth of experience. Vinny does not have that. And when the judge is like, oh, how many have you won? He's like, oh,
you win some, you lose some.
You win some, you lose some. Oh, I had this axe murderer a few weeks ago, and...
Mr. Gambino, this is not the time or place to be cavalier.
He also... The problem with Vinny is that he goes for these, easily verifiable lies.
Mm-hmm.
So he's like, oh, have you heard of the son of Sam?
You defended the son of Sam?
No. They arrested another guy before the real guy, but I got that guy off. So easy to look up and see that is not true, Vinny. What are you doing? But somehow this works, even though the judge launches into this whole, I know you probably think we're really backwards down here and we don't have a functional justice system, but I assure you I take things very seriously in my courtroom. If you want to practice here, you're going to have to learn the way that we do things. And so he hands him this book.
Literally do it by the book.
Yeah, he hands him the book. The Alabama Rules of Criminal Procedure, which, again, this is a very reasonable thing for this judge to be doing because criminal procedure works slightly differently everywhere, and if you want to practice in a place, you have to do it by their rules. So he is not punishing Vinny in any way, but he is just like, I came in here and you had your feet on my desk. You got to take this seriously or you're going to get into trouble.
He's doing his best. This is where I thought it was the most honest depiction of him not being stupid, but perhaps having dyslexia or some difficulty with reading, because every time we see him try to read that book, he's not getting very far. He's clearly putting the effort in because we always see him reading until 2 or 3 in the morning.
Mm-hmm.
And yet, the one time Marisa Tomei picks it up, she gets halfway through.
In one day. Yeah. She is, I think she's kind of brilliant in the opposite direction.
Right.
They complement each other in that way. But speaking of Mona Lisa, she is very excited for Vinny's first case, and she wants to help. So we see her multiple times throughout this movie being like, this is a big opportunity for you. How can I help?
Can I help?
And Vinny just says, no. So the big book of criminal procedure is not Vinny's only problem. Their hotel that they're staying at is directly next to an old sawmill, and there is a whistle that blows at the sawmill every morning at 5:30 to wake up all of the workers. So Vinny and Mona Lisa are rudely awoken at a very early hour. I guess they couldn't get back to sleep, so they decide to go to this local diner and are introduced to Southern breakfast.
Mm-hmm.
What does Southern breakfast consist of?
The biggest ice cream scoop you ever seen of lard.
Directly on the grill.
Going on a flat top griddle. I love the menu of this place when they're looking at it and they're just like, well, what do you think? Yeah, okay. We'll have breakfast. Two breakfasts.
Two breakfast.
The menu just says breakfast, lunch, dinner.
Easy to remember.
Yeah, okay. 2 breakfasts. Yeah, but this very sort of monochromatic, colorless breakfast is
duochromatic. There's bacon on there.
There's bacon. Yeah, it's these what kind of, how would you describe these fried eggs? Because they're
over easy eggs.
But they're not sunny side. There's no sunshine to these eggs.
Well, yeah, I feel like that is how restaurants usually do it, where the yolk is runny on the inside, but it's all sort of covered by the whites.
Yeah.
So it looks very white.
They flipped it one time. So it's white ass eggs on some white ass grits with some white ass butter and some bacon.
And some bacon.
Just a couple bacon.
And this is significant because, as true Yankees, Mona Lisa and Vinny have never had grits before, have never heard of grits before.
Oh, they've heard. I've heard of grits. I've never seen a grit.
Yeah, so now they get to see the grits, and they have to ask this nice man at the diner, what are they? How do you make them? And he explains that, it's made of corn, and you boil it for about 20 minutes, and you top it with butter. And you got yourself some grits. And file that away later. Later, it will be important. But good news is they're now well fed for court, where Vinny, once again, being outlandishly disrespectful, truly outrageous. He walks into the courtroom and just sits up on top of his desk initially, is just swinging his little feet, looking around, and is just immediately outclassed by this district attorney who walks in, who has a real briefcase and papers that he gets out and starts looking through and everything. The DA is clearly very confident and is ready for this to just kind of be a walk in the park. Which, to be fair, also looks to the audience to be true. This is an arraignment, okay? So what happens in an arraignment in a criminal trial is you bring everybody in, you're like, these are the charges. How do you plead? And you say one of two things. What do you say?
Guilty, not guilty, or third option, in some states, nolo contende.
Yeah, so at least in this case, they are given the options to say either guilty or not guilty. Vinny somehow has never heard of an arraignment before. First of all, he doesn't have a suit on. He doesn't know how to address a judge. He doesn't stand when he's talking to the judge. All of these little sort of procedural things that everybody else in the room seems to know, Vinny doesn't know. And he also just tries to launch into basically an argument saying there was confusion when my clients were arrested. They didn't know what they were discussing with the plea, blah, blah, blah. And the judge is like, no. We're not doing that. You need to say guilty or not guilty. And he's like, well, yeah, but they didn't. He's like, no. You say guilty or you say not guilty. If you have an argument, it waits for the trial. Will there be a trial or will there not? The judge is definitely being very condescending here, but I do think it's kind of helpful for an audience member to have the judge be like, well, now this here is an arraignment. This is what we do with this particular thing. And he's doing it to be sort of shitty to Vinny, but I was like, oh, okay. Well, if you didn't know how this part of the procedure worked, now you do.
I mean, he gives him enough chances, right? He starts being shitty maybe the third time he has to explain to this out-of-state lawyer who he has allowed to practice law in his court.
And who claims to have tried criminal cases before. No way in the law is not that different in New York and Alabama that you wouldn't know what an arraignment is.
I think he's being perfectly patient.
Yeah. More than patient, honestly. He only holds him in contempt of court once.
Yeah.
So Vinny ends his first day of court going to jail, which is not super encouraging for Bill and Stan, understandably. Mona Lisa is also starting to get a little bit nervous when she goes to the prison with all the death penalty protesters to bail him out. She's like, they're gonna kill these kids if they're found guilty, huh? That's not great. Seems like you should maybe be taking this a little more seriously than you're taking this, Vinny. She's like, did you not learn what an arraignment was in law school? And friends, they teach you what an arraignment is in law school. I think Vinny maybe just didn't pay attention to some stuff he should have paid attention to, because when she is like, didn't they teach you this in law school? He's like, no, they just teach you about contracts. And it's like, well, okay, you are a personal injury lawyer, so it makes sense that you're not as familiar with criminal procedure. But to say they don't teach criminal procedure in law school is very false. That is extremely false. And Vinny is even more like, no, they just expect when you get a job, the people at whatever practice you work for will teach you that, and then you'll go and watch them do trials, and that's how you learn trial procedure. And she's like, okay, why didn't you ever go and watch some trials? His excuse is well, I didn't have time. I was working at your dad's garage and had a bunch of other jobs and was trying to put myself through school, and I just never ended up having time, which is fair. But again, when she offers to help him, and especially when she's like, I don't have enough money to just bail you out every time you get held in contempt of court. If this is going to keep happening, then that's going to be a problem. We're going to run out of money. He still is refusing and decides to create a new problem when she's like, yeah, I tried to go to a bar to make money playing playing pool and I got stiffed by some guy I beat at pool. And now Vinny is on a different kind of mission. And he's like, we're going to go back to that bar and we're going to find this guy. So they go over to this bar called Pool and Chicken.
This is such a weird side quest narrative to be part of this movie. It doesn't have to be here at all.
Nope. Just for flavor.
But we sure do get to meet JT.
Yep. JT still down at the bar. Hasn't gone anywhere. Guess JT just kind of stays at the bar. They walk in together and Mona Lisa's like, that's the guy. He stole my $200.
I love his friend. The sexiest scene in this movie is when his broham next to him, who doesn't say anything this whole time when Vinny confronts him about the $200. This large man is eating some of the chicken. And he sure does just deep throat a drumstick.
As you do.
Eats all of it in one sort of slurp. And that's when I knew this movie was for me.
Mm-hmm. That's pretty good.
Yeah.
So he and JT have a little bit of a negotiation where he's like, give me my fiance's money. And JT is like, how about I kick your ass instead? And he's like, an interesting counteroffer.
Mm-hmm.
How about I kick your ass and you give me the $200? So they mutually agree to get into a fight. But then he's like, okay, show me the money. And JT's like, well, I don't have the money. And he's like, well, go get the money so we can have our fight. We can't have our fight until you have the money. Don't be absurd. And so they part ways at that point and do not fight because JD doesn't have the money yet. And they agreed to fight over the money.
Right.
So the money has to be there. We cut away from the bar and Stan and Bill are talking about Vinny's performance. Stan is not happy with it. He feels as though Vinny did not do a good job in the arraignment.
He did not.
Which is correct. Yeah, Stan is right at this point. But Bill is a true believer. And why does he believe in Vinny so much?
Well, he's family, Stan. And if it's one thing I know about the Gambinos, they can argue.
To be clear, it is the Gambinis.
If it's one thing I know about the Gambinis, it's that we can argue.
His argument to Stan is that everyone in his family is a born arguer. So Vinny has got to be good at this. And the next scene does kind of give us some evidence for Bill's argument here. Because they're at the hotel, Vinny and Mona Lisa, and the faucet is dripping. And Vinny is like, hey, you didn't turn the faucet all the way off and it's dripping. That's really annoying. And she's like, I did too turn it all the way off. And he's like, well, then why is it dripping? She's like, maybe it's broken. He's like, how do you know it's broken? And they get into this whole scuffle where it basically ends with her being like, I know I turned it off because I know that model of faucet and it requires this much torque in order to twist it. And I know that I applied that much torque to it because I've used a special type of wrench that is also used by NASA engineers and it uses this amount of torque. So I know I applied that amount of torque to the thing and so therefore it must be broken. And it just becomes very obvious over the course of the scene that arguing is just kind of how these two have sex with each other.
Yeah, this is how they flirt.
Yeah, is very sexy. They clearly really like fighting with each other. So it's like, well, Bill might be onto something.
Right.
This is kind of this guy's love language. He loves fighting.
Yeah.
Specifically, he likes verbally fighting. So back in court, we are hearing from our witnesses. So the prosecutor is sort of presenting the evidence that he has to justify why this is a case that should be taken to trial. And all of these witnesses get up on the stand and are, of course, 100% certain that Bill and Stan are the ones that they saw drive up to the convenience store and shoot the clerk. Completely confident, all of them. And this is where the sheriff gets up on the stand and is like, well, I have a testimony from Bill saying multiple times the words, I shot the clerk, which looks pretty bad.
Does look bad, Bill.
There is sufficient evidence for this trial to move forward, is the conclusion there.
This was a procedure that I was unfamiliar with. Like, I guess I'm trying to figure out, like, what's the necessity of a pre-trial? Like this, like, trying to decide whether or not this goes to trial.
A lot of the steps of the trial process are there to make the prosecutor do their job. So this is the district attorney having to bring his witnesses into the room and say, I didn't just conspire with the sheriff to throw some random out-of-town guys in jail. We actually do have good reason to believe that this trial should move forward. You don't want to get all the way to a jury trial with no evidence because well, first of all, you're wasting people's time and it's a miscarriage of justice, but you just want to make sure before the proceedings get too far that there is something actually there. Vinny had the opportunity to push back at this point. He is not familiar enough with the facts yet to push back effectively, that's his problem. But he also says afterwards, like, they want to make an example of you. This trial was moving forward no matter what. That judge was going to look at that evidence no matter what I said in the room today, and he would have said this needs to go to trial. So I didn't bother pushing back on any of it at this point because that would have been a wasted effort. I want to get in front of a jury because Vinny thinks he's going to have a better time winning over a jury than he would that judge. I'm sure there's more like legal stuff to it, but that is my sense given what Vinny says later.
No, I mean, I trust that.
I think one way or another, this has to be part of it. That's what a grand jury hearing is. Have the police and the prosecutors done their due diligence, or is there such obvious glaring errors at this point that there's no point in even digging into the rest of it because it's like pretty obviously like you have no actual evidence, or pretty clearly the police didn't follow the proper chain of evidence or whatever, so none of this evidence is useful. Therefore, we just have to let these guys go because you don't have anything. I do think, given the sort of slapstick nature of those interrogations, the fact that the police did not tell them what it was they had been suspected of, I think you absolutely could make the argument that Bill had no idea what he was confessing to when he said that. It is, at that point, your client's word against the sheriff's word, which I think is maybe what Vinny was worried about, is he would be like, the sheriff didn't give them the information they needed. This, all of this stuff is bunk because they thought they were talking about a can of tuna and not a murder. But the sheriff could just as easily get it up and be like, no, I didn't.
Yeah. And that's why
who are they going to believe, right?
Circle back to rule number 1. Don't talk to cops.
Don't talk to cops.
Don't yell at girls. Don't talk to cops.
Don't yell at girls, don't talk to cops. So the trial is moving forward. Vinny is held in contempt of court again because he mouths off to the judge again. And once Mona Lisa has to go and bail him out a second time, she is less impressed with his argument that, I'm still learning the procedure, right? And she's like, you gotta learn it faster than this. You are screwing this up. And he's like, you should stand by your man. And she's like, no. I don't want to do that when you're potentially going to get your cousin killed. So they, once again, are looking for a new place to stay because the sawmill keeps waking them up at 5:30 in the morning. They move over to a new hotel, and when they're in the hotel that night, Vinny does kind of break down a little bit and confess that Mona Lisa is right. He is screwing things up, and now he does say that he is scared.
I'm scared. Yeah. You want me to say it? I'm scared. You ever seen Rocky 3? I'm scared. Okay?
Yeah, we're back at Rocky again. But Vinny is like, I am in over my head. I know I am in over my head. But he still has this fundamental belief that if he can figure out how to navigate the procedure, he thinks he can win this case. Mona Lisa agrees with this. She's like, just don't fuck it up and you're going to be great, Vinny. But unfortunately, this hotel has an even earlier call because it's like across from a slaughterhouse or something with a bunch of pigs that they let outside at like 3 in the morning.
Yeah,
And they're the loudest pigs on earth, apparently.
The pigging hour.
Yeah, so he, once again, not getting a good night's sleep. After 2 days of bad performance from Vinny, Stan and Bill are, more Stan than Bill, but kind of both of them are thinking about giving the local public defender a try. And here we are introduced to one of the most unfortunate characters in this movie, and a pretty sad story about the actor who played him as well. So the man who plays the public defender very famously has a very pronounced stutter. And it is absolutely played for laughs in this movie. And he is made to look quite ridiculous over the course of the next couple of scenes. I don't want to harp too long on it, but I have an article from Rolling Stone magazine that I will talk extensively about later, but I do just real quick because it doesn't quite fit into the rest of our analysis, but it does bear saying. This actor did not have a good time making this movie and had an even worse time after making this movie because he actually had a stutter as a child. And when the screenwriter approached him and was like, oh, I wrote a part for you, he was like, this is the meanest thing anyone has ever said to me. Like, why are you doing this? But I guess he bought him a very nice dinner and a bunch of alcohol, and so he agreed to do it. And then immediately regretted it. So I have a quote here from the Rolling Stone article that I will read very quickly. So the actor who plays the public defender is named Austin Pendleton. Just about the only person with mixed feelings about the movie is Austin Pendleton. His reasons are quite understandable. Pendleton: I regret doing it. It almost ended my career. Directors and casting agents said, "Oh, you'll never be this good again." What a horrible thing to say about an actor under any circumstances. And with one exception, I've never appeared in a major film again. He also received sacks of angry letters from stutterers after the movie came out. Pendleton: one came from this kid in Canada who was maybe 10 or 11 named Lucas. It was so pure and touching. He talked about how painful it was to sit in the audience. It took me several months to respond. It's the only one I responded to. I said, I was very touched by your letter, and I stuttered at your age. I said, you have to have a sense of humor about it. It's like almost anything. If you have a sense of humor, it really does help you get through it. And I wish you all the best in the world. I got a letter back from his mother saying Lucas was so excited to get the letter and that he never used to talk in school, and now they can't shut him up. Despite being able to help Lucas, Pendleton said the movie still causes him tremendous pain. Pendleton: it haunts me. It haunts my steps. Strangers recognize me all the time. No other film I've made has had that effect. Sometimes after a theater opening, I'd go to an Italian restaurant and there would be a big family having dinner, and they'd call me over and say, hey, stutter for us. Oh man, it's awful. And I guess they meant well, and I would sort of politely demur, and then they would just hound me, and I would refuse to do it. I guess people that don't stutter, they don't understand the pain of the whole thing. I wish I'd never done that movie. The only thing that made it worth it was that letter from Lucas. Yeah, I just wanted to mention that because a lot of the people who are in this movie remember it very, very fondly, and I do think that depiction of an attorney is a pretty big misstep, and one where it's like the screenwriter tried to make Vinny such a sympathetic character by working in the dyslexia stuff, which did get cut, but it's amazing to me that they were like, we don't need to go into this guy having like a learning disability, but this other guy with a stutter so bad that he can't function in court and yet is a lawyer anyway is just sort of a cheap joke about both like stutterers and public defenders somehow. Just the idea that like, oh, well, you can't trust a public defender. Everybody knows that, which is also kind of unfair.
Well, I'm getting better. That part at least was funny.
Yeah, I mean, it's a shame that he didn't get work after that because he is funny.
Yeah.
But it is just unfortunate that it kind of came at the expense of the whole rest of his career. They also didn't need to put it in there because, as we'll see in a few scenes, he's also just not a very good lawyer.
Right.
He also makes some other blunders that it's like you could have just left that in there and taken the stuttering out. And for the purposes of the plot, the same thing would have happened. But
also, it didn't have to be a stutter so much as just a stammer. Like, he could have gotten
just
nervous
been
and
visibly
sweaty
nervous.
and,
Yeah.
like, just not said any of the things. Because that's what Stan said. He was like, what about all the stuff we talked about? He's like, I'm getting better.
Yeah.
Doing my best up here.
A misstep in this movie, but anyway, this public defender has been introduced, and Bill kind of raises the issue with Vinny of like, we're considering going with this other guy, and Vinny is like, please just stick with me, right? And he has this analogy about like, we know that you are innocent, right? Like, you and I both know that you are innocent, and so we know that the prosecutor is going to have to get up in front of the jury and, I mean, not lie necessarily, but he is going to have to make a two-dimensional piece of evidence look like a solid brick wall. Mm-hmm. And I think that I can knock that over. Let me cross-examine these witnesses, and if you still think that I'm not any good, you can fire me on the spot. But let me do it one time, and I think if you get me in front of a jury, I'll be good at this.
And I'll show everyone that this brick wall is just a house of cards.
Yep. And Bill believes in Vinny, not just because he's family, but he tells Stan this story about one of their family members' weddings or something, and the groom was a magician, and Vinny could always tell how he was doing all of his tricks. Mm-hmm. He's very good at identifying, when other people are trying to obfuscate things. So, before we can get to court, Vinny's got to go try to collect his $200 from JT again. But again, we kind of have Vinny illustrating something that Bill has just said about him, right? So Bill is saying he can always tell when other people are trying to lie to him. And the first thing that Vinny says when JT walks up and is like, hey, I've got your money, we can fight now. What does Vinny say?
How do I know that's really $200 and not just a 20 wrapped around a wad of ones? What? It's $200.
All right, let me count it.
Yeah, fan it out. Let me count it. It's $200. You have to count it. So funny.
So JT is in fact lying, and they still can't get into their physical altercation because JT still doesn't have the money.
It's also so stupid because
it's so dumb.
$200, if you did roll it up as 10 20s, it wouldn't be the thickness.
It would be a really small wad of cash.
It would be so small, JT. Like,
yeah, come on, man.
Why didn't you make it that thick of a wad, but then just put a $1 bill? Just be like, I got it in all singles. This is my titty bar money.
Come on, JT. You gotta get better at lying.
JT sucks.
JT can't get in a physical fight to save his life. He's trying so hard and he can't do it.
No.
So Vinny goes from that conversation to have coffee with the DA, and they're kind of bonding with one another about lawyer stories, their sort of lawyer history. Vinny tells the story about how he became a lawyer because he ended up in court with a traffic ticket once, and he argued with the cop to the extent that he got the parking ticket forgiven or whatever. And the judge in the room was like, hey, you would be a pretty good litigator. And so he was inspired to go to law school, and that judge just kind of kept checking in on him throughout his whole time, and he kind of had a mentor figure in him. And from there, the DA invites him to go hunting.
Yeah. Yep. The DA, Mr. Foghorn Leghorn Tipton.
His last name is Trotter, but you were close.
Trotter. Mr. Tipton? Who's Mr. Tipton?
I don't know.
Someone's Mr. Tipton. Anyway, Foghorn Leghorn Trotter.
And Vinny is like, this is going to be a great opportunity for me to get into this guy's head and convince him to give me access to all of his files and all of his evidence and all of his witnesses, which anyone who knows anything about procedure in a legal setting knows that he does not need to go hunting with this man in order to make that happen.
No schmoozing necessary.
Schmoozing necessary.
No finagling.
But he's got it in his head that this is what he needs to do to prove to this DA that he is a man's man.
Yeah.
And because he's such a man's man, he goes back to the hotel and he's like, Lisa, help me pick out some pants. And those pants work like a charm because he's in the car and he's like, gosh, I'd like to get a look at your files, Mr. District Attorney. And he's like, oh, okay. And he just calls his secretary and he's like, can you make some copies of the files for Mr. Gambini? Thank you. And he's like, I've done it. I've won him over. I've finessed him and he's given me everything.
It's so funny, too, because we don't get any scene other than that. We don't see them hunting. We don't see them do any shenanigans. It's literally just hard cut from, what do you think about the pants that I got on? To them just in the car and Gambini going, I sure would like to get a look at your files.
And him being like,
you would?
Oh, okay. Do you have a Xerox machine?
All right.
No? All right, I'll have my secretary do it.
I'll sure just drop it all over there if you can have everything.
And he's so proud of himself when he comes back to the hotel. He's like, he gave me everything. I convinced him. And Lisa, who's been sitting in the hotel room reading the criminal procedure book, is like, wow, that's really impressive, except for the fact that he is legally required to do that or else it would be a mistrial. Because she's got nothing to do but sit and read law books all day long. The other thing that Vinny negotiates is the use of Trotter's hunting cabin to sleep in, though. And that is pretty generous, actually.
Until...
Well, yeah, there's some issues with that later. But the good news is Vinny now gets to go and talk to all of those witnesses. He goes to each of their homes and is like, can you show me what you saw? Like, where were you sitting? Let me look at this convenience store. And he's going around, he's taking pictures with Lisa's camera. But the bad news is the judge has been doing a little bit of research of his own. Mm-hmm. And he's got himself a fax from New York saying that no one named Vincent LaGuardia Gambini has ever tried a case in the state of New York. So Vinny is like, oh, well, that's because I don't practice under the name Vincent LaGuardia Gambini. What does he practice law under?
Well, you see, there was a very famous Vincent Gambini that was a movie star, and I had a film career, so I actually practiced under the name Lou Gallo.
I think it's Jerry Gallo.
Jerry Gallo.
But it's close. And
there's a local poet here named Lou Gallo. That's why that name is
well, look at that.
There you go. Go read a Lou Gallo poetry book.
Yeah, but don't try to look up Jerry Gallo, because Vinny comes out and he's like, I outsmarted him, Mona Lisa. And she's like, what did you tell him? And he's like, I told him I practiced under the name Jerry Gallo. And she's like, the famous attorney? And he's like, yeah, if he looks that name up, he'll find all kinds of stuff. And she's like, yeah, you know what else he'll find? Newspaper articles about how he's dead.
Jerry Gallo's dead.
Jerry Gallo is dead. This is just another thing to add on the pile for poor Mona Lisa. She has been getting progressively more and more unhappy as this story goes on. And in one of two scenes that absolutely won her the Oscar, she is pacing on the front porch of this cabin, wearing the single best jumpsuit in all of cinema. And Vinny is sitting there with his books and he's trying to read through the stuff. And she is kind of starting to panic, basically, because she's like, you are screwing this trial up. You're not letting me help. You're not listening to anything that I have to say about any of the legal stuff. You are just going down in flames and you're making me sit here and watch you do it. And beyond that, what did he promise her?
He says that after he wins his first trial, they can get married.
Get married. And from the right things are going, it looks like I'm never going to get married. Mm-hmm. She's got a niece who's already married, and she's still not married. Marisa Tomei was like 22 when this movie came out, so I don't know what all this biological clock stuff is. But in any case, you made me this promise, and I just have to sit around and wait on you until you win something, and you're just going to keep screwing this up, so you're not going to win this case. And his response is basically like, I don't need this right now. Mm-hmm. I already have a lot of pressure on me, and I'm sorry that you would like to get married and have children, but the real stake here is, if I screw this up, my cousin will die. He will be put to death, and he is innocent. So I'm sorry that I'm not worried about your biological clock right now. I have better things to worry about. And to her credit, what does she say in response to that?
Well, maybe it was a bad time to bring it up.
Yeah.
So funny.
Yeah, I think it was a bad time to bring it up. But they make up by sleeping together in the car under the stars after an owl scares them out of the cabin.
Screeching owl. Almost as loud as the train whistle.
Almost as loud as the train. And it's very romantic until it rains. Yeah. And what does the rain create?
That famous Alabama mud.
The most famous mud in the world. So their car is stuck in the mud in this field. There's lots of pratfalls. He falls in the mud and then he drops his suit in the mud and then tries to go and get another suit, but the whole suit shop is out with the flu and they don't have dry cleaners. So he has to go to the secondhand store and get like a tuxedo from the 1950s.
It's like a bellhop uniform or something.
Yeah, it's got like tails. It's really something.
It's like what an usher would wear in a theater from the 1950s.
Yeah.
It is silly. It's a magician's assistant tuxedo.
Yeah. So once again, the judge is like, are you mocking me with that outfit? No, judge, I'm not mocking you. And in between all of this, when Vinny is like covered in mud and trying to find a suit, JT is like, I finally got the money. And Vinny just fully launches himself at JT and takes the money from him.
It is a flying sucker punch because Joe Pesci is all of 3 feet tall.
He's so small. Oh, Lord. He does finally get to court and the trial gets underway and we get to see the DA lay out his opening statement where he's like, you are going to hear evidence about this car and these eyewitnesses who saw these young men go into the store and here's what you're going to hear from this witness and all of that stuff. And when it is Vinny's time to give his opening statement, first of all, after Ralph Macchio wakes him up, what does he then say to the jury?
Everything that guy said was bullshit. Thank you.
Thank you. And then his whole statement, with the exception of the thank you, is then stricken from the record because in an opening statement, you cannot lay out an argument like everything that guy said is bullshit. So not off to a good start. But fortunately for Vinny, the public defender is also not off to a good start because, again, this is not a compassionate portrayal of a person with a stutter. He also does a really bad job of cross-examining his first witness. And this is why I was like, you could have just kept this and taken out all the stuttering stuff and you still have to fire this guy because his big move is the first guy gets up on the stand. And he's like, yeah, I looked out my window and I saw these guys go into the store and shoot the clerk and drive away. And the public defender is like, don't you have prescription glasses? And the guy's like, yeah. He's like, were you wearing them when you saw the boys? And he was like, no. And he's like, ha ha. And the guy was like, yeah, but they're reading glasses. I don't need them to see a long distance. And then the public defender is just like, no further questions.
Well, let's test this out. What color are the defendant's eyes?
He's like, brown and hazel green.
Hazel green.
What? Oh, okay, no further questions.
No further questions. That's a tough cookie to crack.
Yeah, woof. Yeah, not a good cross-examination. But fortunately, what Vinny lacks for in any knowledge about procedure whatsoever, he makes up for in his cross-examination skills.
Yeah.
So just do yourself a favor today and look up these cross-examination scenes from My Cousin Vinny, because they're all very good.
Mm-hmm.
The gist of this first one is that witness 1, who claims to have seen these boys run into the store while he was making his breakfast, and they left by the time he was done making his breakfast, and it took all of 5 minutes. And of course, what was he eating for breakfast?
Eggs and grits.
And can you make grits in 5 minutes?
Well, if they're instant grits.
Oh, but they're not instant grits, are they?
No self-respecting Southerner would eat instant grits. This Alabama, we take pride in our grits.
Right.
Pan over to black woman and jury who just nods approvingly.
Yeah, they pan over to that lady a lot.
They do. Anytime there's a question of proud Southern heritage, they just have to show you her and be like, that's right.
Yeah, or the time.
Mud in the tires? Oh, that's right. We've all had that.
And that.
Yeah.
And then
so funny.
The DA tries to be like, our mutual ancestors, all from England, gave us the word whatever. And they
Verdict from Old English.
And the lady is like, nope, not my ancestors, but okay.
No. It's like 3 black people in the jury over here, fella, but all right. We're going to let that one slide, Trotter. Yeah.
So basically, Vinny has absorbed all of his new knowledge about the South and leverages it to be like, the timing of your statement is off by 15 full minutes. And if you were mistaken about the timing, you could be mistaken about all kinds of things.
Right.
And so he has sort of successfully poked holes in this first witness's testimony. And when he is done, someone in the gallery claps.
Yeah.
Which is very funny. And Stan is like, all right, I want to rehire this guy. He does know what he's doing, it turns out.
It's important to note that all 3 of these major witnesses, before we get to the expert surprise witness, are all neighbors. None of them are truly eyewitnesses. And that's said as early as the opening statement. They're all eyewitnesses who saw the boys go into the store, exit the store, and in between, so they say, they heard a gunshot.
Yeah. Well, and realistically, what it turns out to be is they saw a green car, saw some people at some point, heard something that sounded like gunshots, and maybe saw a car drive away. Well, and that's all they've got.
And legitimately, some of them may have seen these 2 boys enter the store. That was what's so important about these grits, is like, this dude probably did see these guys come into the store, but then he left and made his breakfast and was gone long enough for our heroes to leave, the villains to show up, murder the clerk,
and
him to hear the gunshot, and then he see 2 people get into a similar looking car to drive away.
So Vinny is really in his element now. We've got witness number 2 who claims to have seen everything, and he's like, well, your windows are covered in dirt, you've got a dirty screen, you've got a bunch of trees and bushes in between your house and the convenience store. Is it possible you just saw a car and maybe not their car, and you saw 2 guys, but not necessarily those 2 guys? And he's like, well, I guess so. Third lady's even worse.
What's this picture of? My house and stuff?
Your house and stuff? Good for you, man.
House and stuff. And then what are all these little things on the trees? What do we call those? Leaves. That's right. That's right. Go ahead and just shout it out when you know.
Shout it out when you know. What are these called? Trees.
What are these bushy things all around the trees? Name's bushes. I love that guy.
Yeah, just a true good old boy. A lot of the people who are like extras and in the background are just like from whatever town in Georgia they filmed this in. It's very cute. Anyway, witness 3 is the woman who can't see anything even with her glasses on, and he just does a practical demonstration to be like, can you even see the back of this room? No?
Let the record show that the defense is holding 2 fingers.
Now, come on, man. After this first day of the trial, the DA still isn't worried because he calls Vinny at night to be like, I've got a surprise for you tomorrow at the trial, which legally Again, we've already talked about the concept of disclosure. He's not allowed to have surprises. He has brought in a special automotive instructor of forensic studies for the FBI, and he just brings him in at the 11th hour, doesn't do anything to prove his credentials, doesn't explain anything to the defense about any tests he might have conducted, and when Vinny tries to very reasonably object, the judge is like, that was a very good objection. It is overruled. Yeah. And I was like, why, Judge? Yeah. Why?
It's absolute dog shit, too, because the DA says to Vinny on the phone, oh, well, I'd love to share it with you, Mr. Gambini, but this evidence just came to me just now.
Why weren't you starting the conversation by being like, now I brought in an expert and he's going to do tests on these tires, just so you know. I'll share the results of that as soon as I get them with you. Feel free to go and talk to that guy about his credentials.
That's what's so absurd.
Doesn't happen.
He made it sound like he didn't even hire this expert.
Yeah, the guy just showed up and was like, here.
Who would have called, like, the sheriff was going to call this FBI guy? No.
The prosecutor called him and didn't tell the defense until the 11th hour, which is a Brady violation and should have led to a mistrial, or at least the expert witness not being allowed to testify. But that is not what happens. He is allowed to testify.
Or an approved motion of continuance, which is all Vinny was asking for. It's just like, we need more time.
Let me talk to him.
Yeah, we need
he doesn't get it.
I've seen Law & Order, damn it.
Anyway, the moral of the FBI guy's testimony is that he did some tests and he can say, oh, those tire tracks outside of the convenience store are definitely from the defendant's car. He says it's for sure from those tires. For sure, definitely.
Well, this is some great body work by Mr. Trotta when he's talking to the jury and he's examining the expert witness, because he goes, well, we did testing on the rubber molecules as part of those skid marks, and we also tested those SR14 tires on the Buick Skylark, and the composite molecules are identical. And then the DA looks at the jury and goes, claps his hands, and like throws glitter at them, essentially.
Identical.
Identical.
So stupid.
It's like, yeah, it matches. Okay. Okay. Identical in this case doesn't mean from those tires.
Well, yeah. Vinny's first, pushback during his cross-examination isn't that the most popular brand of tires and model of tires on the road today? And he's like, well, sure. And he's like, okay.
All right.
So already this analysis doesn't mean much, but he can kind of sense that,
identical.
This guy got up there and said all this jargon about tires, and that probably convinced the jury. So during this brief recess in which Vinny lies to the judge about his name again, he is given this 3:00 deadline because the judge is going to call somebody in New York and get a final answer about whether this guy is legit or not.
Jerry Gallo?
No, it's Jerry
Callo. Jerry Callo. All right, Mr. Gambini.
I'm going to call him. He'll be back at 3. Gambini. Mona Lisa is still like, please let me help. Please let me help. I can tell that we've gotten down to the wire here. And now Vinny kind of blows up at her a little bit.
He's a bit of a dick.
She has gotten some of her photos from her camera developed, and he just starts flipping through them, being like, oh, great, yeah, this picture of me in the shower, that's really going to help, Lisa. You solved it. Great, wonderful, so glad you're here.
This is the one, the smoking gun. It's dog shit. It's a picture of dog shit. Wow.
Yeah. So
actually, that is the picture that he needs.
Yeah, literally. So she's taken a bunch of pictures of the skid marks outside the convenience store that, she thinks could potentially be helpful, but he is just in such a place of panic that he's just throwing her pictures around, being a jerk to her. So she storms out and leaves. And so he's trying to apologize to her, but she runs away. And so he sits back down and he's looking at these pictures and he's like, oh no. I really did miss something in here. But the solution comes to him because this is a fair universe. And if the prosecution gets a bullshit witness, then so does the defense. So who does Vinny call to the stand next?
Expert automotive witness Mona Lisa Vito.
And he does, she's mad at him and she's on the phone out in the lobby. And we don't know who she's talking to, but he comes out and he's like, please, I've thought of a way that you can help. And now she's like, fuck you. I don't want to help you anymore. I don't care. And so he wrestles her into the courtroom and has the bailiff drag her up. And at first she doesn't want to talk. And she's like, no, I don't want to talk to him. I hate him.
Permission to treat Ms. Vito as a hostile witness.
Is there a pre-existing relationship between you two? Yes, she's she's my fiance. Well, that explains the hostility. Again, just go watch this scene. Just go look it up on YouTube or something. This is the best sex scene in all of cinema, in my opinion. So they go through this whole rigmarole of the DA voir direing her so he can prove that she actually has the expertise that she is claiming to have.
Judge, might I voir dire this?
Voir dire.
Might I voir dire?
So the gist of her testimony, and again, you should go and watch it because it's very fun, but the tire tracks outside of the convenience store not only most likely aren't, but actively could not be from the Buick Skylark.
Mm-hmm.
She says a whole bunch of stuff. I don't know how much of it is true to actual cars, but basically...
The 1964 Buick Skylark doesn't have positive traction. It's got a fixed rear axle so that those tire marks couldn't be made because anyone who's gotten stuck in Alabama's mud knows that when one tire goes spinning, the rest of them are doing nothing.
Cut to the lady on the jury being like,
that's right. That and grits. Those are the things I know about.
So there is, in fact, another type of car that those tracks must have come from.
Well, there are two other
sure.
cars in America made in that time period where those tracks could have come from. One is the Corvette, and no one
could never be confused with the Buick Skylark.
The other that has positive traction with independent rear suspension, blah, 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 is a 1967 Comet?
1963 Pontiac Tempest.
And because the 1963 Pontiac Tempest was also made by GM, could it be available in metallic mint green?
It was. I hit my microphone. I was so excited. Give me the Oscar.
It's a great scene.
It's so fun to watch her because she starts out so mad at him, and like halfway through she realizes what he's doing and she gets so excited.
Yeah.
It's so cute. And just for fun, Vinny then calls the sheriff to the stand because as soon as he was looking at those pictures and being like, oh, it's a different car, he passes this note to the sheriff and is like, just go look into this. Please go look into this. And so the sheriff...
I don't have to do that. Do your own research. It's like,
please,
you,
I've got 3 minutes. I've got 3 minutes. And also you're the sheriff. Do your job.
Yeah, maybe.
So the sheriff looked into it and he found a report of a Pontiac Tempest being pulled over in Georgia for being stolen. It was being driven by two men who resemble Bill and Stan, and they also had what in the car?
Well, was there anything else, Sheriff? Yes, there was something else. They had with them a .357 Magnum in the glove compartment.
And what type of gun was used to murder the clerk?
A .357 Magnum.
Hooray! I'm hitting everything in this room. So in light of all of that new evidence, the state decides to dismiss the charges. Everyone rejoices. Ralph Macchio cries. It's a beautiful scene. And now Vinny needs to get the hell out of Dodge because that judge from New York is going to call and tell them he's been lying and he's going to go to jail. So he is like trying to get out of the courtroom. All these people keep coming up and being like, oh gosh, congratulations. I would like come back down here anytime. Come and see us. And Bill's like, oh, thank you. I will never be able to repay. And he's like, no, it's fine. Give me a call later. Think on it. And call me later, Bill. I got to go right now. But the judge does sort of waylay him on his way to his car. And he's like, I owe you an apology, Mr. Gambini. I was mistaken about you. Because even when she was extremely mad at him, Mona Lisa used that energy to call that judge from New York that he had a friendship with and convince him to lie to another judge about Vinny's identity and say that, oh yes, Jerry Callow has an illustrious law career here in the state of New York. I'd vouch for him any day of the week, which is bad. That's corruption. But it does mean that Vinny gets away scot-free. So he and Mona Lisa are driving away and he's like, I guess you want to get married now, but I don't even feel good about that. I wanted to win my first big case without anybody's help. And she's basically like, that's stupid. That's dumb. You want to have a career where you lose a bunch of cases, or do you want to have a great career where you win a bunch of cases and, oh darn, afterwards you have to say thank you to somebody? What a nightmare. So he's like, oh, okay, fine. I guess we'll get married. And she's like, I don't want to marry you anymore. You can't even win your case on your own. Why would I want to marry you? And then they bicker into the sunset.
Yay!
Yay! A happy ending for everybody.
Except for Norton.
Well, Norton is put to death, unfortunately.
Norton did get executed.
Yeah.
And he was only 11 years old.
Oh, no. Well, and I guess the clerk also got murdered, and that's unfortunate, too.
Yep. Poor R.I.P. Willis. Willis who?
Jimmy Willis, I think?
Jimmy Willis.
Yep.
R.I.P. And that one lady that never showed up except in that scene seemed to be really distraught about it.
She was really upset.
They killed Jimmy Willis!
They killed Jimmy Willis!
She was upset. And JT might be dead.
I think JT's probably fine.
Might be.
I think JT learned a valuable lesson about hustling money from women in bars.
Yeah, maybe.
But yeah, that's my cousin Vinny.
There he is. Thoroughly synopsized.
Very synopsized. Too synopsized, one might say.
Well, we did skip over a really important plot point about how one hotel featured a train that comes. And Vinny asked very specifically if it comes at 5 o'clock every morning, and the hotel clerk says, no, it's highly irregular. Only to find out that its regular schedule is about 10 after 4.
That man should become a lawyer also. That's the kind of clever obfuscation that would really take him far in the legal profession, I think.
I don't know. I feel like this is yet another stereotypical depiction of Amelia Bedelia-ass Southerners.
You know how Southerners are always lying about the times that trains come in?
No, not lying, just being intentionally letter of the law truthful, and that's it, omitting any other context.
Yes. Okay, no, you're right. You know how Southerners hate giving context for things?
Well, no.
I feel like you're the one being prejudiced, actually.
But if I may voir dire this... All right.
Okay.
Let's go.
All right. So I want to start off just by covering some of the legal conversations around this movie, because this movie is, broadly speaking, beloved by the legal professionals of America. The American Bar Association named it the third best legal movie of all time. Do you know what the first two are?
Just guessing here. Isn't that one with Jack Nicholson where he's like, you can't handle the truth? What is that? A Few Good Men? Is that one of them?
How dare you do this to me?
Is that one of them? Is that it?
That's number 14, obviously. No one would say A Few Good Men is better than My Cousin Vinny. Who would ever say that? Not me in the first take of this bit that we did.
I don't know. Is it Jag?
Not the television program Jag.
My grandma used to really like Jag. He was a handsome Navy lawyer.
Grandmas love handsome Navy lawyers. Everyone knows it.
Okay, I guess I don't know. Is one of them Atticus Finch? Did he do it?
Yeah.
Okay.
What piece of media is Atticus Finch from?
Don't Stab Him with Scissors. The Boo Radley story.
What kind of Southerner are you?
I don't enjoy killing mockingbirds.
The whole point of the thing is you're not supposed to kill them. Okay, yes. Number 1 is To Kill a Mockingbird, and number 2 is not A Few Good Men. It is 12, a number of men.
12 angry men.
12 angry men.
They're not particularly good.
I can neither confirm nor deny the goodness of the 12 angry men. But yes, My Cousin Vinny is number 3, which is not to say that it is without problems in the way that it depicts the legal system. We talked already about Vinny's just rampant unprofessionalism, like independent of legal training, things that he should just know better than to do in a workplace of any kind. But there are also some, legal issues. So in an article for Laws and the Multiverse, a writer named James Daly points out that one of the most obvious flaws with the way that criminal procedure is depicted in this movie, though maybe an understandable one from the perspective of the writers, is that Vinny is, by the time that this public defender is asked to leave, representing 2 separate clients in a criminal trial, and 2 clients that have been technically accused of different crimes, right? So Bill is the one who is accused of actually murdering the clerk, and Stan has been accused of being an accessory. But Vinny is representing both of them at the same time, which is something that would almost never be done in real life. Partially just for practical reasons, but partially because depending on how the specific facts of it played out, it could literally violate something called Rule 1.7 of the American Bar Association's Model Rules of Professional Conduct, titled Conflict of Interests. Would you be so kind as to read the text of that rule for us real quick?
A conflict may exist by reason of substantial discrepancy in the parties' testimony, incompatibility in positions in relation to an opposing party, or the fact that there are substantially different possibilities of settlement of the claims or liabilities in question. Such conflicts can arise in criminal cases as well as civil. And you've put this in bold. The potential for conflict of interest in representing multiple defendants in a criminal case is so grave that ordinarily a lawyer should decline to represent more than one co-defendant.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yes, so to parse that, basically there are, especially in criminal cases, pretty high chances that if you have two defendants, that they could be pretty easily turned against each other. And so just by definition, they're going to end up having sort of opposing claims, and a lawyer can't represent both of those people's interests equally if they are in conflict with one another. So
I've heard of the prisoner's dilemma, but the lawyer's dilemma? Hi. Let the record show I grabbed my non-existent tie a la Rodney Dangerfield and tried to loosen it. If they were accused of the same thing, could they then have the same lawyer, or is it the same problem of like one defendant might seek a, plea bargain by sort of turning on the other?
I think the same problem still exists. If you've both been accused of murder, like a person is shot with two different guns at the exact same time, and you have both been accused of pulling the trigger of those separate guns simultaneously, I think you still have the problem of one of those people, actually both of them are probably going to be like, well, he made me do it. Like that's the sort of problem that's going to exist there.
Or
most likely.
He fired both guns. I didn't fire a gun.
Sure. Or some third person fired one of the guns. Or two separate people fired two of the guns. Like, people don't want to go to jail is the thing.
Sure.
They don't want to go to prison, and they are going to do whatever it takes to make sure that what happens to them is not as bad as it could be.
Right.
And if that means you throw the other person under the bus, then that's what you do.
Well, but no matter how you slice it, there's no reason why these two defendants would be essentially treated as one person, one crime. It's two people,
right? Yeah,
multiple crimes.
It's bizarre to me that they're even on trial at the same time, seeing as technically they have been accused of two separate things. That is sort of strange to me.
But it makes for a great movie.
Well, yeah, and that's what the Daily article sort of acknowledges, that if you're going to have two people present for whatever this crime is, like, it would be weird for the movie to just be like, and now we're just going to focus on Bill's trial and forget Stan, who cares what happens to him. Like, that would be a weird choice. And there are exceptions to this Rule 1.7 if the people involved consent to it. If they say, like, yes, we would like to operate as a package deal for the purposes of this trial, and we want one lawyer to represent us, you can. It's just generally really ill-advised.
Sure.
This is a movie, so the article is basically like, yeah, it'd be kind of boring to sit and watch them in a room trying to, like, hash all of that stuff out. So there's a reason the screenwriters didn't bother to put that in, but it is one of those things that's like, you don't take that lesson away from this movie in real life. You want your own lawyer.
It is kind of interesting, though, because presumably the DA would have called the exact same witnesses, because all the evidence that he had to convict one of them was the same to convict the other. Like, all the witnesses saying they saw two boys enter, heard a gunshot, then saw those boys leave in their Skylark would have had to given the same testimony in both trials?
Yes, but what would happen if these were two separate trials, what you would then have the burden of proving if you're the prosecution is that, okay, Bill has been accused of murder. What I need to prove is that Bill had the gun in his hand and he fired it at the person.
Which the DA already said, like, I sure wish I had the murder weapon.
Right, yeah. In Stan's trial, you don't really need to prove, like, what time he walked into the store or whatever. You would have to prove that he either knew what Bill was going to do ahead of time and helped him do it, or figured out what Bill did afterwards and helped him get away. So it's sort of two separate but connected sets of facts that you would have to prove, which, like, would take entirely different sort of sets of witnesses.
None of that is the kind of evidence that the DA presents in this movie anyway.
Oh,
It's all circumstantial. We have three eyewitnesses, but what they testified to is they saw those boys go in the store, and they saw people that looked like those boys come out of the store, and they identified a car that looked like their car, and that they all testified they heard a gunshot. None of them were in the convenience store.
But even if Bill goes down, you're going to have a much harder time proving that Stan did anything.
Right.
And if Stan's smart, he'll be like, I didn't know anything about it ahead of time. And then he like threatened me on the way out. He said if I told anybody or I tried to stop him, he would kill me too. Which again is going to be hard to do without a weapon. But anyway, these are the many reasons that these two guys would not probably be represented by the same lawyer.
Right.
That is not the only sort of legal issue that we see playing out in this movie. So the YouTuber Legal Eagle has a very good video about My Cousin Vinny where he goes over a lot of things in a lot more detail than I'm going to. But there are some pretty obvious ones, some of which are just sort of a sign of like the time that this movie was made. One of the biggest sort of miscarriages of justice right off the bat that, again, if Vinny knew what he was doing, he would just get everything thrown out immediately is this police lineup that they stick these guys into. Do you know what some of the problems with this police lineup are?
I also watched the Legal Eagle episode, so yes,
yes, you
I
do.
The one that stands out that's pretty obvious, even if you don't know anything about police lineups and just how sort of fraught they are to begin with, is the idea that all of these dudes in the lineup are such like drastically different shapes and body sizes.
Yes.
And like it creates this like triangle with some huge dude in the middle.
He's like 8 feet tall.
These other two dudes next to him, and then Stan and Bill are separated, but it's clear enough to see that they're about the same height, and then like these very short dudes next to them.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, that seems like a little ridiculous because Bill and Stan seem to be somewhere in the average height range of like 5'6" to 6 feet, and everyone else is comically large or small.
Yes.
So, I don't know.
Yeah, and you're correct. That is the big problem with it. I don't even think police do these sort of in-person police lineups anymore. They don't just get a bunch of guys in a room and make them stand against the wall most of the time because it's just not helpful in general. But the idea behind a police lineup is that you want the witnesses to give you a description of who they think they saw and get people in a room who all look sort of like that.
Right.
And you put your suspect in that mix somewhere because the idea is this witness's memory good enough that they can pick an actual perpetrator out of a lineup of people who all look very similar? And if they can do that, then you have a bit more of a reason to suspect that their memory and their identification is correct.
Hey, and spoiler alert, most of the time, people can't do that, especially if it's something associated with violent crime. Memory is horrible.
It's very fallible. Very, very, very fallible.
The last time I looked into this, I think it's basically a coin toss. Like, it's no more than...
If you're lucky.
If you're lucky. I mean, it's so not an effective way of determining a suspect. The only time it's been helpful is if a victim remembers some distinguishing mark, a scar, a tattoo, something that isn't shown in the lineup that they can say like, okay, number 4, can you lift your right sleeve or something to determine if that, in fact, is the person that has it? But that's so rare. It's just not.
Yeah. Basically, what happens if you do something like what they do in this movie is, okay, we've got some witnesses who are like, I saw 2 white guys with dark hair. They were about medium height, probably like average height, not remarkably tall, not remarkably short. They go in and they're like, okay, I'm trying to look at this lineup and see the guys who I think fit the description of medium-sized guy with white skin and dark hair. And there are only 2 of them in the lineup.
Right.
So, of course, you're going to be like, well, the closest to what I remember is those 2 guys right there.
Sure.
They're the only ones who even come close. And because there's no one else in the room that fits that description for the witness to compare that memory to, they're going to be like, I guess those 2 guys?
Yeah.
Rather than being like, well, those 2 guys are close, but they're not exactly what I saw. Because, like, they just don't have a specific enough memory of it, these people that they saw from across a parking lot or whatever, to definitively say, like, yes, it's absolutely 100% these guys, or no, it's absolutely not.
The other big problem psychologically is that most of the time, if you're called in to identify someone in a police lineup, most people, just for whatever reason, given the like situation and the authority of the person asking you, they feel compelled to give an answer instead of saying, I can't say for sure.
Yeah.
Most of the time, people, even if they don't know, they'll be like, oh, it was definitely 3 and 7.
Yeah.
Are you sure? Well, yeah, it's got a Yes.
Well, and again, the incentive for police in this situation is to find an answer. And so, you know, the same kind of pressure that police, when they're interrogating someone, put on a suspect, they also occasionally put on the witnesses. Because they're like, right. Are you sure you don't recognize any of these guys? Are you sure number 3 and 7 don't look familiar to you? And then if they say that often enough, you might be like, well, maybe. Yeah, sure. Those two. Sure. And also, like, you just want to get out of the room because it's not fun to be in a police station. Like, there's a lot of reasons why the police lineup is not good and is generally not used.
The other big goof for this one was that they were in the same lineup.
Yes.
And like, it's kind of a joke when they're in there, but they talk to each other. But the fact that they talk to each other makes them even more of a package deal.
Yeah, it's like, well, those two already know each other, so it must be those two.
Clearly, it's the two that are the two.
So yeah, our boys are denied due process right away, and if Vinny had an understanding of how police procedure is supposed to work, he would just be like, right off the gate, like, absolutely not. They were put in the same police lineup. Start over, police. Unfortunately, he doesn't do that. But Vinny is also the kind of person who lies to a judge.
Multiple times.
About such easily verifiable information. It's just like, forget anything actually related to the world of criminal law. He lies about the name that he practices law under. He lies about having experience. He should never have been granted permission to practice in the state of Alabama. He is not a criminal attorney. Bill's mom should have called him and he would have been like, no.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I'll help you find a different one, but no, I can't practice criminal law. I'm a personal injury attorney. Those are two entirely different fields of legal practice. He has no business in a criminal courtroom.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but this is just like Naruto, where...
You know when Naruto lies about being a judge from New York?
No,
that famous plot arc on Naruto?
We just watched an episode last night where two different characters in two very different situations were both like, no, 5 or 6 other very powerful teammates that could definitely help me in this situation. You have to let me do this by myself because I want to prove that given the chance, I could do it by myself. For no reason, no benefit to the defendant, the team, the civilization, but only for myself, because I have something to prove to me. So stand back and let me work. I know I can do it if you just give me a chance. Yeah. It's like, that's cool, Vinny, but this is a murder trial, and they love killing people in the state of Alabama.
And more to the point, it's not just going to be Bill that goes to prison. You will go to prison. You lied to a judge about your credential. You illegally tried a case in a state you are not licensed to practice in. This is insane, Vinny.
Yeah.
You lied about your identity multiple times, and then you got another judge complicit in your lie. If the two of you ever get caught, you are so fucked. You're both disbarred. You will never practice law again. You might go to jail. Craziness.
See, and you thought I was telling a joke, but it is just like Naruto.
It's not really like Naruto. There's actually more tendencies between Vinny and Naruto that we might talk about a little bit later. But
okay.
The other inaccuracies are somewhat smaller things about, like, for example, how these expert witnesses are just allowed in, and the judge is like, why not?
Yeah.
I've never seen these people before in my life. Sure, they're expert witnesses. Come on in. That is also just not how things work. But there are also some things that this film gets right.
Voir dire?
I don't think the voir dire is correct, but the thing that is so excellent about this movie that it is occasionally taught in law school is Vinny's cross-examination and then direct examination of witnesses. So textbook takedowns of these witnesses' testimony. He makes very good use of evidence. He is doing a very good job of, like, one little bit at a time poking holes in the witness's testimony so that by the time he gets to the end of his examination, it kind of doesn't matter if the witness is like, well, no, I think I did actually see those boys despite the fact that I can't see through my dirty windows that have a million trees in front of them. He has, like, destroyed their credibility. And there is a decent representation of discovery and disclosure, only thanks to the Marisa Tomei character actually reading the books. Mm-hmm. So up to the point that the expert witnesses are introduced and there is no disclosure or discovery, she is right about, like, how lawyers are required to share evidence and information about witnesses with each other and things like that. For those reasons, people in the legal profession, by and large, do think that the sort of spirit of this movie is a good representation of the legal profession. There is a blog post from a law professor who organized a sort of 20-year anniversary of My Cousin Vinny sort of discussion. He sums up the overall view of this movie in the American legal world pretty well. Spencer, if you wouldn't mind reading that quote for me.
I would be honored to. One reason I place My Cousin Vinny under the theme of legal education is that it provides so much material you can use in the classroom. For example, you can use the movie to discuss criminal procedure, courtroom decorum, professional responsibility, unethical behavior, the role of the judge in a trial, efficient cross-examination, the role of expert witnesses, and effective trial advocacy. But the reference to legal education goes deeper. I think you can use the movie to discuss the most common topic of debate within legal education itself. Interestingly, however, in My Cousin Vinny, the issue here is turned on its head. After Vinny's girlfriend, Mona Lisa, bails him out for a second time after having been found in contempt, she criticizes his performance in court and tells him it is pretty clear he does not know what he's doing. She then utters one of my favorite lines in the movie. "Don't they teach you that in law school?" Vinny's response is just as classic. "No! They teach you contracts!" Obviously, the implication is that in law school they teach quote-unquote law and not how to practice law. There are many ironic twists to this short exchange. First, as to those quote-unquote things that his girlfriend was referring to, we do teach you that in law school. Vinny may not have learned them, or may have forgotten them, but we do teach them. But Vinny is right that there are many things you need to know to practice law effectively that we don't teach in law school. The reason I say the movie turns the issue on its head is that Vinny is terrible at the things we do teach in law school, but very good at the things we don't. Although Vinny is certainly no role model when it comes to knowledge of the law students could learn from him as to how to use legal thinking in the complexity of actual law practice. Vinny needed to learn legal analysis, that which law schools are best equipped to teach, while many of today's graduates need Vinny's inherent ability to interview clients, to gather facts, to prepare a theory of a case, to negotiate, to know when to ask a question and when to remain quiet, to cross-examine a witness forcefully, but with charm, in order to expose the weaknesses in their testimony, and so on. To be successful like Vinny, all law graduates need to develop both their analytical knowledge and their practical skills. And also like Vinny, they need to learn to accept the fact that they need help. Like Vinny, they cannot do it all alone. Were it not for his girlfriend, and of course he means fiancé, Vinny's attempt to practice law would have ended in a disaster and possibly in disbarment. We can all learn from that lesson too.
Just like Naruto, we all sometimes need to learn that it's okay to ask for help, and you don't have to do everything all on your own.
Correct. Because if you do too many wind Rasen shurikens, you'll totally destroy the cellular makeup of your wrist and hand.
Yeah, it'll destroy your chakra network, and you need that to practice law.
Chakra law.
Yeah, so I think that's a good summation of what makes this movie so charming from a legal perspective. It's not that it's particularly accurate. There are parts of it that are and parts of it that aren't. But the idea that at its core, being a trial lawyer is about being able to tell a story and to be able to communicate that story to people and to convince them and win them over is, I think, pretty powerful. Mm-hmm. That is a skill that not everyone has.
I wonder if this is a movie that's not so much celebrating law, but rhetoric. Mm-hmm. All those things that the law professor was just complimenting Vinny on has much more to do with what we might call forensic rhetoric. Mm-hmm. The idea of like looking into the past and constructing a theory based on facts and evidence and doing so in a way that persuades people beyond a reasonable doubt mm-hmm. that the events occurred in such a way as you are constructing them. And in fact, you are not making a house of cards, but rather a sturdy pillar of justice upon which Bill and Stan can stand free.
Well, and it's interesting that he is a defense attorney. The role of a defense attorney is, in fact, not to prove anything beyond a reasonable doubt. That is the burden of the prosecution.
True.
The defense is there This is a thing that kind of drives me crazy when people talk about defense attorneys. They're like, they just want to help criminals get off, and they don't want anybody. They don't want anybody to get punished for doing anything wrong. That is not the role of a defense attorney. A defense attorney is there to act as a check on the prosecution to ensure that the prosecution is doing their due diligence to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that someone has done the thing that they are accused of.
Right.
Because you shouldn't just throw people into jail willy-nilly. You should have to follow proper procedures in order to gather actual evidence so that people are not just railroaded. That is the role of the defense attorney. They are there to be in conversation with the prosecution and say, you have made a wild claim. You will need to back that up.
Right.
And if you don't back it up properly, I am here to point out to people that you have not done that so that they can think before they send someone to jail.
That's a good point. Yeah, the defense attorney is not actually there to help the client in the way that we kind of think of, but rather to champion what we all have as rights of the citizens of the United States, which are legal and constitutional rights. That's what the attorney is defending, is those rights. And all that forensic rhetoric mumbo jumbo I just said was more or less what you just said, of challenging the story that is being constructed and asking, well, how do you know that event A led to event C? What evidence do you have supporting the idea that event B happened in the way that you say it happened? Why can we trust the credibility of witness 1 who suggests that event C, you sunk my battleship, A1, B2, A1 steak sauce?
I mean, I think people are uncomfortable with the idea that occasionally people who have committed crimes will not go to jail for it or face whatever the punishment may be.
I'm way more uncomfortable with the idea that someone who has not committed a crime gets to go to death row for it.
Well, sure. I'm also way more uncomfortable with the idea that even a person who committed a crime can be sent to jail without anyone having to substantially prove that they did it.
Right.
And that, to me, is why the role of the defense attorney is so important and should have more respect than it has, because even a person who has committed a crime should not be thrown in jail without someone having to prove that they did it. And that's why I like Vinny's card analogy so much when he's talking to Bill, like, you and I both know that you didn't commit this crime. And that guy is going to go out there and he is going to say that each piece of evidence that he has is rock solid, when you and I both know that's not true. So he is laying out the role of the defense attorney to say, like, anything that looks like a brick should be proven to be a brick. And if it is not unassailably a brick, it should not be confused with a wall. So, yeah, I like the movie in that respect, too, for making that such a clear principle.
What makes this movie a safe place for boys?
Well, let's talk about that.
You know, what's happening and why it
Well,
might
ensuring that people have a robust defense in the legal system is good for boys, because boys get arrested more than people of other genders. But anyway, let's talk about the titular boy.
Okay.
Let's talk about Vinny, played by a friend of the show, Joe Pesci. I don't know why I said it like that. We just like Joe Pesci. I enjoy his work. I feel like I've never seen him in a movie where I didn't think he was the best part of the movie.
One of my favorite roles of Joe Pesci is not in the original Lethal Weapon, but in all of the sequels, where he plays Leo, an informant, who his famous line is, "They fuck you, they fuck you, they fuck you." And if you don't know what I'm talking about, go watch Lethal Weapon 2, 3, and 4.
Isn't that just about his, like, Subway sandwich or something, too?
Everyone, it's different. They go through the drive-thru in the first one, I think, and he gets the wrong toppings on his sandwich. And, and then because they fuck you, they fuck you, they fuck you.
That's true. That is kind of the energy that Joe Pesci brings into all of his work. He just, every character he plays suspects that someone is trying to fuck him. But anyway, so Joe Pesci was unbelievably not the first choice they had for this character. And boy, the people that they were considering is perhaps the most 1992 lineup of actors.
Alec Baldwin.
No.
Robin Williams.
I can do you two better. One of them is Jim Belushi.
No.
And number 2, Andrew Dice Clay. Can you imagine this movie with Andrew Dice Clay?
Wait, did they think this was an SNL bit?
I don't know why anyone would hire Andrew Dice Clay to do anything, but that's just me.
Dennis Leary.
What? You're just naming actors now?
No, I'm just trying to imagine, like, what kind of weird, sort of edgy, like, late 80s comedian style person they were hoping to get. Like, and I kind of get it based on the way that, like, Vinny dresses and his sort of background, I guess. I could imagine those other guys in this role, but come on, man. Joe Pesci.
Yeah, it's gotta be Joe Pesci.
Joe Pesci's so funny.
So he was like kind of at the top of his game at this point. Like he had just finished Goodfellas. He won his Oscar for Goodfellas while they were filming this movie. So, I mean, for a number of reasons, Joe Pesci was a good choice. I referenced earlier a Rolling Stone magazine article. It's sort of an oral history and we'll link it in the show notes. But the casting director, who's named David Rubin, and Paul Schiff, who is one of the producers, discussed that casting decision. Would you mind reading that quote for me, Spencer?
David Rubin says, Vinny is an underdog who triumphs in spite of his limitations. He does expose his insecurities in those early scenes, but he covers it in a bravado. So you're rooting for him to tap into that bravado in the climactic scene. The natural confidence that Joe Pesci has was perfectly suited to that arc. Schiff says, the idea of going from Goodfellas to Vinny was pretty thrilling because he brought all of that credibility playing a guy who was pretty damn tough. But putting that tough character in a situation where he is over his head and struggling to win this complicated case was just a really funny, rich situation. Joe has a particular intensity that is very credible. He has that streetwise swagger that just played into the character beautifully.
So, do you agree with their assessment of Vinny as a character? How do you feel about his sort of arc throughout this movie?
I mean, he steps out of the car with his freaking aviators, his leather jacket. He looks cool. He looks tough. You think he's going to pull a gun at some point in this movie, and he never does.
Yes, he does. He pulls a gun on the owl, and he doesn't kill it.
Well, it's not his gun.
Yeah, and he just fires it into the air.
That's like the most silly New Yorker scene of just someone shooting a gun wildly in the woods, like at a noise.
Every direction.
And then sort of trotting back inside like, yeah.
I must have done it.
I did it. No, I love him. I think he's funny. I think he's competent. And every time you think he's going to do something shitty, like I remember seeing that scene with the grits. What is a grit? You know, you think he's going to like make fun of these Southerners or like think of people as stupid. And he never really does that. He kind of just like maintains his own personality and challenges people and argues when he wants to, like with JT. But he doesn't make JT seem stupid. He doesn't like trip JT up in a logic knot. Yeah, I don't know. I guess I was just poised to think of him as like a potential sort of my way or the highway, myopic kind of know-it-all sort of guy, but he doesn't do that. And I think it's really interesting that early on in the movie, he is, self-aware enough to tell Lisa that he is scared, that he is worried, that he's not going to be able to do a good enough job. And I like that we see him, like, despite his shortcomings in the courtroom, we do see him trying as best he can. Like, it's very important for him to get rest. It's very important for him to study. He doesn't like go off and do weird little side quest adventures, like except for going hunting with Trotta because he thinks that that's something he has to do to get intel to be better at solving the case, you know? So
it seems to me that Vinny's sort of arc throughout this movie is that, you know, you said that he admits to being scared and he recognizes that he has these shortcomings, but his sort of flaw, if there is one, is not wanting to accept help from anyone, specifically from Lisa, but from other people as well. You know, he doesn't even just want to ask Trotter, can I come over to your office and look at these files? Can I come make some copies? He's like, well, I've got to go hunting with him and I'm going to have to sweet talk him. And he comes up with all this artifice to make it so that he's not just asking this guy for what he thinks is like a favor, which is actually a legal requirement, but he just like can't even stand the idea of just simply going up to someone and be like, I'm going to need some help. Can you do this for me? Can you help me with this? Do you think that is a thing that male viewers will resonate with when they are watching Vinny?
Yes. Yes. It's difficult to ask for help. And sometimes it's even just difficult to ask for things that you want. Because men are strong and self-sufficient and want for nothing and certainly don't need other people to help them, get what they want. It's interesting, though, because for most of the movie, even we, the audience, are kind of like, well, yeah, but I don't know how Lisa could help either. Until that last minute when he sort of like sees something in one of her photos that helps him realize that it's probably a different car and that she could testify to that fact. But up to that point, I mean, I take that back. She's clearly reading that book way better than he is.
Yes.
And I wish that bit about the dyslexia was kept in the script so that he had a reason early on to say, like, can you help me better understand this? Like, can you read it and talk to me about it? Because clearly he, in that scene when he like lodges the objection about the expert witness, he has a great memory and he knows what to say and when to say it. He's capable of learning decorum and procedure. It's just hard for him to physically read it. So yeah, that would have been a really good opportunity to show more throughout that he struggles with asking for help.
We see that show up with other characters who aren't just Lisa, but do you think the fact that she is a woman that he is romantically involved with is part of why he's so resistant to, even when he's like, clearly she understands this book better than I do, still not wanting to take this step of like, okay, here is actually a way that you can help me, like not wanting to label what she is doing for him as helping? Do you think there is a gendered part of that?
Yeah. I mean, he's set this arbitrary bar for himself that we can't get married until I win my first case, which is just a way of saying I have to prove my worth as a breadwinner, as an intellectual, as someone who makes smart decisions like going to law school before I can be worthy of being your husband in this antiquated way. And so, yeah, I mean, I think because that sort of agreement is undercutting everything, she's the last person who he could admit needing help from, because then it sort of invalidates that he's proven his worth himself.
That's so interesting. Okay, I'm going to skip forward a little
really
bit.
Stupid, but it is what he's thinking.
That kind of ties in with what I wanted to talk about with Mona Lisa. So, according to that oral history from the Rolling Stone, when the screenwriter, whose name was Dale Launer, brought the script to 20th Century Fox, the company president said to him, quote, "Good work, very funny, good work. Do you think you could cut the character Lisa out of the movie? She has so many great lines. It would be great to give those to Vinny since it makes her look smart." And Launer, of course, said no. Quote, "I said, you gotta understand that when Vinny puts her on the stand at the end, Vinny has to know where she's going. Vinny has to know everything she knows. It's just more impressive coming out of a woman's mouth. And because they have a bit of a row, this becomes a romantic thing for them. And when she realizes she's up there to help him win the case, she's in her element. It becomes an important part of the movie." Do you agree with him?
Yeah. Like, what kind of... That's the most important part of the movie. Like, it's interesting because, you know, we're going to talk in a little bit about, like, cultural stereotypes and the sort of, like, North v. South sort of representation in this movie. But, yeah, there's absolutely a gendered component of this woman with the New York accent who clearly knows a lot about stereotypically masculine subjects like auto body repair and being a mechanic and wrench sets and positraction or whatever. You know what I mean? And so, like, it's nice on the level of the audience having their sort of stereotypes challenged. And it's also nice in terms of layering the commentary about, you know, not judging out-of-towners based on stereotypes that you have and not judging a place based on, you know, just weird little, you know, they're all inbred and are part of the clan. And it's like, okay. So, I mean, I think that's hugely important. And, I mean, I guess you could imagine this movie without the romantic subplot. It's hard for me to imagine it without Marisa Tomei because she's awesome. But what's this movie about if it's just Vinny showing up and having realizations that, you know, demonstrate that he can be a good lawyer? Is it just about, like, fucking believing in yourself and pushing it to the limit? Like, this is an 80s movie, not a 90s movie if it's that. And it would suck. It'd be unbelievable.
My mind, even though this movie, like, starts out with Bill and Stan and the thing that is sort of in the balance is whether they will be, like, put to death by the state of Alabama. In my mind, this movie is, first of all, fundamentally a love story. And fundamentally a story that is, like, putting forth a theory about partnership. I think it is important that they have come to an agreement that they will not get married until Vinny wins a case. And that for him, what would make that legitimate would be winning a case without anybody's help. And he happens to have a partner who all she wants from the moment she shows up on screen to the moment this movie ends is to help him.
It's Chinese food. Oh, no.
It's good Chinese food and not getting stuck in the mud. No, I think, like, essentially the thesis of this movie is about the partnership between these two people and how his idea that he has to do all of this without any help is hindering him. That he's never going to move forward if he never wants help. And specifically, what it means to be in a partnership. The whole reason you would bother to get married to someone in the first place is because you want to navigate situations like this together. And that, I think, is why Mona Lisa is in this movie. She is there to constantly be like, if you want to be married to me, this is what that's going to mean. We are going to solve problems together. And if you don't want to solve problems together, then you don't want to be in a partnership, and you certainly don't want to be in a partnership with me. I think the only reason this movie wraps up at all is because these two find a way to work together at the end.
Yeah.
So as much as it is like a legal comedy, it's also just a movie about what it means to be in a marriage or a partnership with someone.
He has to, I think, recognize that he's been relying on is sort of the like negative way, but like in a partnership with people that have been helping him achieve his goals from the very beginning. Like he wouldn't have ever thought of going to law school if it weren't for Judge Malloy suggesting, hey, you'd be a hell of a litigator. He wouldn't have been able to make it through law school if he didn't have a job working nights in the garage. He wouldn't have made it out of Alabama alive were it not for Lisa calling Judge Malloy and getting him to lie for him and, you know, set the expert witnessing aside and her sort of, you know, legal counsel aside. But yeah, and I just wonder if that's reflected at all with Stan and Bill. Is it equally a story of them learning to trust family and relying on, or not? Are they just kind of props?
Well, I mean, I do think they're a little bit more props than some of the other characters are. But it's interesting that the legal system is the vehicle used to tell this story about partnership and solving problems together. Because, again, as much as it is quote-unquote adversarial, the whole legal system in the United States is, at least in theory when it's working well, a system of people who have to work together to find the truth. That is why both parties get lawyers. That is why that those rules of disclosure exist. You are supposed to share information with one another. And, you know, that scene where the DA and Vinny are having coffee together is not something weird and out of the blue. Lawyers, even people on opposing sides of the same case, work together closely. You want them to do that because theoretically the goal is to come together and figure out what the truth of the matter is and to represent all of the parties involved to the best of your ability. I mean, I do think Bill being so adamant that he trusts Vinny is also part of that. He is saying, I believe in this person, much in the same way that Lisa does, like, more than he believes in himself sometimes. Bill is seen as kind of naive because for most of the movie we do not see Vinny acting in a way that justifies that. But I do think that they at least are fulfilling that theme a little bit. They're definitely, like, not given a choice because they're pretty passive characters for most of this story. But I do think the idea of trusting people, trusting in your relationships with people is a theme that runs from the top to the bottom, with the exception of the judge who just gets lied to a lot. Oh, poor Herman Munster. Not treated well.
I like the cut of your jib, Gambino. I might like to voir dire it. I was just thinking about that scene where they were having coffee. It's kind of cute.
So do you think it is valuable for male viewers to see a character like Mona Lisa in a film like this, where you have this powerhouse Joe Pesci character? People are kind of used to seeing Joe Pesci play a certain type of person. Do you think it's valuable to have a female counterpart to him who is, like, very clearly more competent in certain ways?
Yeah.
Everything that guy just said is bullshit. Thank you.
No, I mean, yeah, it is girl power. I mean, this movie wouldn't be a movie without her.
Yeah, it would have no staying power, I don't think.
Doesn't make any sense.
beyond the sort of girl power, like, yes, girls can also know about cars. I think it's actually kind of important to show a woman who is so, like, not just dedicated to being helpful, but willing to, like, stand up for her own interests, and to have a male character who, for the most part throughout this movie, like, respects that she has legitimate concerns, and occasionally he is like, we can't have this conversation right now. There are more important things. It's not that I don't care about you. You know, I like that scene of them fighting on the porch. These are two people who both have, like, legitimate concerns at this time, and it both boils down to, like, this is a high-stakes situation, and I don't want to screw it up, or I don't want to see you screw it up. And I like that they do kind of get into a fight, and then she is like, all right, this one's on me. I screwed up. I shouldn't have brought it up right now. We'll return to this later. And she doesn't bring it up again until the very end of the movie.
Maybe this wasn't the right time.
They're people who, like, know how to fight with each other. She is never punished by the movie for being sort of brash and picking on him when he is very clearly screwing things up. And it's just kind of nice to see two people who are allowed to sort of, like, complement each other in that way, and that the movie reinforces, like, not only do neither of these two people need to change in order to be a good match for each other, they actually desperately need each other in order to succeed. So, I don't know. I think it's nice.
Agreed.
I think it's great. And I think Roger Birnbaum, president of 20th Century Fox, is a misogynist. All right. Let's shift to our sort of final topic of conversation. We alluded to it a little bit before, but this is a movie that, among other things, is about place and the way that people from certain places behave or perhaps do not behave. So it probably will not surprise you terribly to learn that this movie did not do well in the American South. And it is because people in the American South didn't even go and watch it in the first place, because they put the line that Stan says about everybody down here is in the Klan and they all sleep with their sisters into the trailer.
Hey.
So once again, 20th Century Fox, why you made that decision, I don't know. Beyond that one line, which understandably turned a lot of people off from even wanting to see this movie in the first place, do you think that this movie does a fair job of representing the South, or do you feel like by and large it gets very hung up on stereotypes? Speak for the South, Spencer. Do it.
All right. Couple things here. The South is a heterogeneous place.
Yes.
I am not from Alabama. I am not from Mississippi. I am not from Georgia. And these places are deeper south than anything that's in my blood. And there's a bit about the South. Okay, so I'm from Virginia, and all you got to do to be a Southerner who makes jokes against other Southerners is look lower. So in Virginia, we talk about the travesty that is those North Carolina drivers. In North Carolina, they talk about all those hicks down in South Carolina. In South Carolina, they talk about those rednecks in Georgia. Everyone hates Florida. It's the penis of the United States. It's not even the South.
And when you get down to Florida, it wraps back around where they're like, well, it's those New York drivers.
Right.
They're the ones screwing everything up. But Florida's not a real place, so it doesn't matter.
And somewhere in there is a discussion of Mississippi and Alabama, which, all jokes aside, cannot be separated from real issues of Jim Crow, racism,
poverty.
Absolute poverty.
Staggering.
And I think it's important to kind of start there, because here in this movie, we have this judge who the first thing we see him say to Vinny is, now, I don't know what you might think coming from that big city, but we take procedure here in the courts of Alabama seriously. And it is just as rigorous of a judicial system as you'll find in any other place. And that's his way of saying, like, I don't even bring that shit in here. I treat the law seriously, no matter what the history of this place, this state, this region might suggest to you, particularly an outsider, or to anyone else, because this is the 20th century. We are serious about law and order here. This is not a kangaroo court. We're not here to unjustly put someone away. That said, the popularity of the death penalty is extremely high in this state and
That's
other
also,
states in the
to
region.
be clear, not exclusive to the South, though. Still to this day,
Is that
not
true?
exclusive to the South. It is not fair, as with all things, to say, like, here is a societal problem. it is exclusive to the American South.
This is where this judge is coming from, is kind of where he's setting the tone. He comes in
immediately defensive because the assumption is that certainly Vinny, as a person from New York City, will think terrible things about the South with no evidence, because we know that that is true. But also, the audience coming into this movie, perhaps prompted by the one stupid line you put in the trailer about inbreeding in the Klan, will also think, oh, it's a movie set in Alabama. I bet everybody is going to be a backwards inbred redneck who doesn't know how to read and doesn't have any teeth or whatever.
Right.
And they are saying, like, that will not be what we are playing with here.
And particularly the judge character is defensive in this world of saying, like, okay, look, we as a state and as a region do have a history of trials and legal proceedings that are all but a facade, particularly when it involves non-white defendants. And in a movie where we have Vincent Gambini, Bill, a.k.a. Ralph Macchio, and Stan, I think, Rothenstein. That needs to be said, right?
Yes.
That these out-of-town Italian Jewish New York City boys are going to get a fair trial. So point number one, I appreciate that. Now, that being said, the My House and Stuff Joe Dirt character, stereotype. The guy is ridiculous. JT's ass, stereotype. Ridiculous.
What is JT a stereotype of? Is that a specifically Southern type of man, or is that just a stereotype of a type of man?
I would put him in the hick category.
I think you need to go to a bar in the Midwest, my friend. That is not a Southern man exclusively, I don't think. And JT is interesting because he is introduced in such a way that you think, okay, he's just going to be like a violent redneck. He'll probably say something hateful to somebody, and that will be why he'll make some kind of crack about, Vinny being Italian as he tries to kick his ass. And none of that happens. And in fact, the conversation that they have is so orderly that they don't get into a physical fight for multiple scenes because they have not met the conditions of their contract yet. And so, at least on that level, we're getting away from a lot of different types of stereotypes, because there are also stereotypes about, New Yorkers and, oh, there's an Italian mob, and I bet Joe Pesci's violent. That is also a thing that exists, and that is a Northern stereotype that, again, we're like, well, they shook hands about a contract, and they're, trying to get this money before they can fight. I don't know.
Here's why I think JT's a Southern stereotype. Dad used to tell a story about how stupid men in the South were, that if you got into an altercation and a redneck good old boy pulled their gun on you, all you had to say to defuse the situation was, "Some kind of real man you are, you can't even whoop my ass without a gun," and they'd be so mad and have their masculinity so threatened that they would throw their gun down so that you could then hit him with a tire iron or whatever. And I think that kind of what we're seeing in this is Joe Pesci's character outsmarting, air quotes, JT, and then ultimately beating him with a sucker punch. So there's some level of this kind of imbecilic Southern man. There's all these little old church ladies. There's the weird old man sitting on the windowsill eating peanuts or whatever. There's all sorts of just caricatures. Does that make it a horrendous depiction of the South? No. I mean, Foghorn Leghorn is still funny. I say, now I tell you, let me voir dire this.
Southern accents are a real thing. People
and they are funny.
Do sound like that.
People sound like Marisa Tomei. People sound like the freaking Goodwill Hunting. Do I think this is an egregious move against proud Southern culture? No, not at all. I think it's funny. Do I think they rely on stereotyped caricatures of what people living in a small Alabama town could look and sound like? Yes, of course, because it's a funny movie. Ultimately, at the heart of it, I think, is a discussion of how difficult it can be to communicate across cultures. That scene with the Utes is funny because Joe Pesci then doesn't understand what the judge's saying when he says, a what? Because he has his own exaggerated Southern tendencies of talking. He goes, a what? A what? What? They literally are talking past each other. Yeah. It's only a few bits of dialogue, But it is evocative of the whole film. Like there's all these moments of people not quite understanding each other.
I feel like the message of the movie is still that the onus is on Vinny and Lisa, and by extension, sort of the non-Southern audience, to meet the people in this movie where they are rather than the other way around. A lot of media treats the sort of... Here, I'll put on my political cap. The coastal elites. No. But, people from northern cities, New York, Chicago, big cities like Los Angeles are treated as the default, and basically everybody in the middle of the country is weird and backwards and needs to be sort of corrected My Fair Lady style. At least from my perspective, I think it's interesting that this movie is saying, like, no, you are in a place, and if you want to learn how to communicate effectively with the people in that place, you need to meet them halfway. And if you are generous with them in that way, maybe they will meet you halfway too.
That's why ultimately, I think this movie is just about good rhetoric, right? Because that is what the case hinges on multiple times. Vinny has to learn how long it takes to cook grits. He does that by genuinely asking a dude, what is a grit? Lisa has to compel a jury to understand her testimony about positration by invoking Alabama mud. You're right. They've actually taken the time to learn about this place, its people, the culture. God knows they've had many opportunities. They've stayed in probably every hotel this town has to offer, and a lodge, a hunting lodge. And yet, we only see a small facade of what a small Alabama town could be. And it does all adhere to the stereotypes that those coastal elites might hold. But the movie does still give you this message of, like, you have to come to a place of understanding.
Yeah. Well, and I do think the very fact that they bothered to put that line about the Klan and everybody sleeping with their sisters in there and have everybody in the room turn and look at them like, what are you talking about? Is, some more evidence of, like, that's the most extreme version of the stereotype. And we won't be engaging with that, but there are things about stereotypes that are occasionally true to life. You're gonna see a simple country lawyer in this movie, because guess what? There are some people who talk like that in real life. They do exist. They're out there. Probably fewer of them now than there used to be, but...
Identical.
Can you imagine how much fun it would be to be in a courtroom with that guy, though? That's a jury I'd want to be on. And be I think this man's lying about everything, but he's having a great time doing it.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's talk about the sort of flip side of this. What do you think that the sort of men that you grew up around, if you can think of whatever your idea of a sort of Southern man and Southern community would be, how do you think they would feel about these out-of-town characters? Do you think they would be, like, inherently suspicious of these two young men from out of state? Do you think they would be mistrustful of Vinny? Do you think they'd be mistrustful of Lisa?
They would absolutely be mistrustful of Lisa. The scene where Lisa is, "What did?" and she describes it as a bullshit question and then explains why it's a trick question. This is the most sort of aggressive we see Trotter get in the whole case. He, like, gets up in her face, because you can't answer it. That's the kind of male chauvinism that I grew up with, where, yes, it's really important for her to be so eloquent, so fierce, so correct, such expert. They wouldn't trust Vinny because he looks like a mobster and wouldn't be allowed back in the courtroom without a suit ever. And that would just be the de facto excuse as to why this trial couldn't move forward because this is a clown. As sort of strict as the judge says he's going to be, he gives Vinny so much leeway. I've seen judges that would, like, throw this out immediately. Like, they're looking for a reason to get these weirdos out of their courtroom.
Yeah.
And the last thing I'll say is that I don't know how people where I'm from would have treated Bill and Stan, but I'll say that this would be an incredibly different movie if they were black. It would be a drama, not a comedy.
At one point, they were considering Will Smith as one of those boys, and they were like, it's just not. It won't be fun.
No, I hate to bring it to that, but, like, when I think of Southern stereotypes, so much does boil back to race, one being a clearly Italian character and the other being a Jewish character. Like, that's what would bother people in this jury, and stereotype or not, in my experience, that would be the thing that would possibly be too much for a good old Southern boy to overcome.
You know, it's one of those sort of unspoken problems of the legal system is that sometimes you can lay out the best case possible and it still won't work because, and it might not even be a thing that people are able to verbalize that they have a problem with.
Mm-hmm.
But, I mean, we see a little bit of that, like the court stenographer, whoever, who calls Stanley Rothenstein, and he's like, she steined me. Like, and it's sort of treated like a throwaway joke. That's the kind of thing that would happen consistently, and it would kind of poison people in a way that, like, it's not that they would be like, I think he did it because he's Jewish or whatever, but there would just be enough of those little things that it might, and again, this is the kind of thing that is not exclusive to the South. This could happen anywhere, and has, and will, but this movie is not necessarily interested in digging quite that far into the specifics of bias. All of that being said, what do you think are some major takeaways from this movie for male viewers?
I think it's a movie about bias,
Mm-hmm.
and I think it's a movie about cooperation. So, big takeaways for me are sometimes you got to get by with a little help from Marisa Tomei.
And if that's not a lesson we can all take to the bank, I don't know what is.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a movie where it doesn't celebrate the sort of stereotypical man who overcomes the odds by digging deep. I hate that story.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, except in anime. I love it there. And in this case, Vinny tries really, really hard only to discover that the only way he can succeed is with a little bit of help from Marisa Tomei.
Marisa Tomei and a judge who's willing to lie for him.
Sure. And I do think it's got something interesting to say about cultural communication and checking your biases, and that stories are important, right? Mm-hmm. This is a legal drama, so at the end of the day, both lawyers are trying to tell a story to a jury and to a judge. And if those stories are based in stereotypes and biases and half-truths in sort of the expectation, then we may never get to the truth of the story. Mm. And thankfully, with a little help from Marisa Tomei,
yep,
we got to the truth of the story. And that truth is Jerry Callow.
Jerry Callow. Practicing attorney for 16 plus years.
Yeah.
Win some, lose some.
Win some, lose some. This is not the time to be cavalier.
Except that apparently it is. All right. Well, on a scale of 1 to 10, how highly would you rate this movie? And to whom would you recommend it?
I recommend it to everyone.
Mm-hmm.
Especially the KKK and inbreeders out there.
Yep.
I feel like y'all could really
They could really learn
this.
something from this.
I don't know. It's high. Where are you putting it at? I can't remember. I wish we need a scorecard.
I know, we need to just write down the scores that we're giving things. I think I'm at like a 9.
Yeah.
Just because I think it's such a good depiction of a romantic partnership. I feel like so many movies, if they have a love story, it's about people like falling in love and not a lot about how you like keep a relationship going and like what it actually means to be in a long-term relationship. And I just really admire that they made a point to be like, no, these people have been together for a long time and they are trying to figure out what it means to be in a partnership. And I think that's very cool.
Yeah. I don't know. I think a 9 is respectable. I'm going to give it an 8.5 just because I'm a little grumpy.
Okay.
And I have no other reason for that.
That's fine.
And if you think that I should bump up the grade, send us an email at safeplaceforboys@gmail.com.
Yeah. Or, recommend some other good depictions of midpoint romantic relationships for us. It's
that I can give an unnecessarily low grade to, because even though that was a really well thought out objection, overruled.
All right, we're not going to find a better point to end on that. Thank you for joining us here at A Safe Place for Boys. We will see you next time for more compassionate conversations about masculinity in media.
Bye-bye.
Bye.